A young girl wakes up in a sun-drenched room, her hair a messy bird's nest as she groans in frustration. She looks down, horrified to see the tiny, pudgy hands of a toddler reaching out. She kicks her small, sock-covered feet in disbelief, realizing the nightmare has started all over again. Staring into a nearby mirror, the reflection of a wide-eyed, blue-eyed child stares back. She collapses back into the plush blankets of her crib, the weight of the situation hitting her like a ton of bricks. The realization is soul-crushing. She has regressed yet again. The story of her suffering began with a prophecy. An oracle once spoke of a child born on February 29th who would manifest divine power and save the world. High-ranking officials and priests knelt in the hallowed halls of the church, desperate to find this savior. They scoured the land, searching through orphanages and common households for any sign of the chosen one. They inspected every babe held in their mother's arms, hoping to find the spark of divinity. From grand estates to humble villages, the search was relentless. Finally, they found a child that seemed to fit the description. The priests gasped in shock as they looked upon her. "This is the child," they proclaimed, presenting the golden-haired girl to the world. That child, born on a leap year and supposedly possessing immense divine power, was her. She stood at the center of attention, a tiny figure surrounded by sparkles and high expectations. She was quickly adopted into a noble house under the watchful eye of the imperial family. The temple took charge of her education, forcing her to study day and night to unlock her potential. But as the years passed, the divine power they sought never grew beyond a tiny flicker. She became a disappointment, watched by judgmental eyes as she failed to manifest the sacred sigil. Wrapped in the shadows of her own failure, she felt the world closing in on her. Just as the temple and the imperial family were at their breaking point, the doors to the hall swung open, flooding the room with a blinding light. A pair of modern sneakers stepped across the threshold, and the true child of fate finally appeared. A girl from another world had arrived to take the throne. In an instant, the protagonist was branded a fake. For the crime of deceiving the empire, she was condemned by the masses. Her life ended in tragedy, her body used as a mere sacrifice to seal away an evil god. But death wasn't the end. The gears of time turned, and she found herself spiraling back through past lives. She woke up as a 4-year-old, gasping for air in her crib. At first, she was overjoyed at the second chance. She thanked the heavens, vowing that this time she would live a good life. But destiny is a cruel mistress. She died again, and then again. By the time she opened her eyes for the 4th time, the novelty had worn off, replaced by bitter exhaustion. She knows exactly what comes next. As she sits in her crib, she senses the approach of the Empress Dowager. The doors fly open, and the maids present her with a life-altering choice. It's time to pick a father for her adoption. This is the crossroads of her regression. The first candidate is Duke Amiti, a righteous knight and protector of the empire. The second is Duke Valois, a scholar from a prestigious family of intellectuals. And the third, the coins and jewels surrounding his name say it all, Duke Dewbald, the wealthiest and most formidable villain in the world. In her very first life, she chose Duke Amiti. He looked like a hero from a storybook, handsome and noble. She played the part of the perfect, grateful daughter, always smiling and trying to please him. She even presented him with heartfelt letters and flowers, hoping for a scrap of affection. But the Duke was a cold man. He would walk right past her without a word, leaving her standing in the hallway with her gifts ignored. She felt an invisible wall between them, a distance she could never bridge. As an orphan, she was just happy to have a father. But her happiness was short-lived. Everything changed when Mina, the true child of fate, appeared. The Duke looked at the newcomer with a warmth he never showed the protagonist, seeing in her the spitting image of his deceased first love. Soon, the two were inseparable, laughing and playing while the protagonist watched from the shadows. When she was falsely accused of trying to poison Mina, the Duke's kindness vanished. A priest screamed that she was worse than an animal, and the Duke grew to loathe her very existence. He visited her in a dark dungeon, his eyes cold and unforgiving. He leaned in, his gaze piercing through her. "Father," she stammered, but he had no mercy left. He told her to become a sacrifice for Mina and the world. She was met by the Grim Reaper, a skeletal figure claiming her soul. And so she met her first death. Then came the first regression. She woke up screaming, realizing she was back in that same crib. There was no way she was going back to Duke Amiti. In her second life, she chose Duke Valois. On the surface, the Valois family seemed perfect, welcoming her with open arms. But it was all a facade. Behind closed doors, the Duke was a monster, screaming at her for her lack of divine power. His wife watched with a cold, detached expression. He branded her a useless girl and struck her down. Death claimed her once more, much to the annoyance of the Reaper, who seemed tired of seeing her so soon. In her third life, she tried to flee the system entirely, running into the snowy woods. But a child's body couldn't survive the elements, and she starved to death under a bridge, the Reaper literally telling her to stop dying. Now, in her fourth life, she's back at the selection. Amiti is a traitor, Valois is a monster, and she can't run away. With a look of fierce determination, she makes a move that shocks everyone. She reaches out and grabs the paper for the final option, leaving the maids and the Empress Dowager speechless. She arrives at the massive, sprawling estate of the Dewbald family. Standing before her is the man himself, Duke Theodore Dewbald, the greatest villain in the world. His aide is nervous, explaining that the Empress Dowager has entrusted the child to them. The Duke doesn't even look at her, his eyes cold and sharp. The old woman has gone senile, he mutters. Without a hint of hesitation, he gives a simple, brutal command. Send it back. The protagonist watches him, noting his intimidating presence and his reputation for having the empire's greatest wealth. He's undeniably handsome, a fact she can't help but acknowledge, giving him a mental score of 100 for his looks. She wonders why a man like him would remain celibate after his wife's death. The aide tries to argue, saying that refusing the empress will cause political trouble, but the protagonist knows better. Based on her past lives, she knows this man isn't afraid of the papacy or the throne. He stands by the window, a silhouette of pure power. She knows she must stay here. This family is overflowing with money, and more importantly, they'll likely leave her alone. Her true goal is a comfortable exile, a life of luxury on a tropical beach far away from the plot. To fund her retirement, she needs to stick to 𝐤𝐵𝒃 like glue. She tries to speak, but her toddler tongue betrays her, turning her words into gibberish. The Duke and his aide look down at the tiny girl, completely confused by her unannounced rambling. Realizing her development is slower than other children, she panics. She needs to prove her worth right now. She reaches out and grabs the Duke's expensive trousers. Looking up at him, she drops a bombshell. She mentions a secret regarding an unannounced tax audit that is supposed to happen on December 7th. The Duke freezes, staring at her in shock. How could a 4-year-old possibly know that? She puts a tiny finger to her lips, whispering that ish a secret with a cute but calculating wink. She looks him dead in the eye, her blue gaze burning with the will to survive. Please adopt me, Duke. Inside the Duke's study, the air is thick with tension as 𝐤𝐵𝒃 questions the impossible. How could a 4-year-old child possess such dangerous knowledge about a secret tax audit? He stares her down with a gaze cold enough to freeze blood, demanding to know how she could even understand such a complex term. Panicked by the implications, his aide immediately rushes out to verify the girl's claims. 𝐤𝒃𝒚 looks up at the towering Duke, her heart racing as she wonders if her gamble finally paid off. 𝐤𝐵𝒃 remains stoic, merely noting that she smells like a pony before ordering his men to prepare a bath for her. Terror grips 𝐤𝒃𝒚. If this information isn't enough to prove her worth, she fears she'll be tossed back to the monsters who abused her in her past lives. Desperate to secure her safety, she bolts toward the Duke. Her tiny feet scramble across the polished floor. She trips, tumbling forward right at the Duke's feet. Without hesitation, she clings to his leg, putting on the performance of a lifetime. 𝐤𝒐𝒐 looks down, baffled by the sudden physical contact. But 𝐤𝒃𝒚 doubles down, begging for a hug in her most innocent voice. He tries to peel the distraction away, but she won't let go. Internally, she is screaming. She refuses to die or face the agony of another regression. She wraps her arms around him, declaring her love for the Duke with a bright, calculated smile. Her soul cries out for a single chance to stay. 𝐤𝒐𝒏 stands frozen, awkwardly holding the tiny girl who has just upended his world. To understand the weight of this moment, one must know the power of the state religion, Nereid. They sit at the pinnacle of the empire, surrounded by influence and shadow. However, the political landscape shifted drastically when the 𝐤𝐵𝒃 family rose to prominence. They were a force of nature, pushing aside the 5 major ducal families to become a new pillar of absolute power. 𝐤𝒐𝒏 sits at the head of this lethal dynasty, a man who rules with an iron fist. Against all odds, 𝐤𝒃𝒚 is permitted to stay as a distinguished guest. She breathes a sigh of relief, knowing she survived the first hurdle. But she knows the real work starts now. To pay her rent, she begins feeding the Duke's aides high-level secrets, including the location of rare 𝐤𝐴LKN in the old plateau. The aides are stunned, giving the young girl a thumbs up as they realize the treasure trove of information she possesses. They are fascinated by her cleverness, unaware that she is using her memories from 3 failed lives to manipulate the present. They truly believe she is the miraculous child of fate. 𝐤𝒃𝒚 plays the part perfectly, though she knows she's a total fake. When an aide reaches out to her, she instinctively flinches, her body remembering the trauma of her past. The staff notices her shyness around everyone except the Duke, whom she clings to for protection. Strangely, despite his reputation as a villain, she feels a sense of security in his presence. 𝐤𝒐𝒏, sensing her unease, bluntly tells her to sit down and join them. As sunset paints the castle in gold, the negotiations continue. An aide offers 𝐤𝒃𝒚 a piece of candy as a reward for her precious stories. She struggles with the wrapper, her tiny hands unable to open the treat. Suddenly, the Duke's hand reaches out and snatches it away. 𝐤𝒃𝒚 is horrified, thinking he's actually stealing candy from a child, and her eyes well up with tears. But to her shock, he simply unwraps it and places it in her mouth. He tests her loyalty, asking if she would sell out his family's secrets if someone else offered her sweets. She vigorously shakes her head, declaring she is firmly on his side. For a fleeting second, the Duke's expression softens into a faint smile. A nearby maid is stunned, wondering if the cold-blooded master actually just showed emotion. 𝐤𝒃𝒚 is skeptical, convinced a man like him doesn't have a heart, but she doesn't mind. To her, the safety of the 𝐤𝒃𝒃 castle is nothing short of heaven. The staff begins to dote on her, offering puzzles, snacks, and activities. Over the next few days, 𝐤𝒃𝒚 begins her behind-the-scenes operations. She systematically charms the influential maid Winda with adorable praise. Next, she targets Dahlia, the person in charge of snacks, by sharing her candy. Finally, she wins over Uni, the record keeper, by showing concern for her well-being. Soon, the entire maid staff is obsessed with their new young lady. 𝐤𝒃𝒚 smirks. She now has a network of allies to protect her if the Duke ever turns on her. However, her favorite is Rhea. When other maids gossip about 𝐤𝒃𝒚's low divine power in the dark corridors, It was Rhea who silenced them and held her close. Rhea's kindness is genuine, expecting nothing in return. As Rhea tucks her in for a nap, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 finally understands what it feels like to have a mother's warmth. In the middle of the night, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 wakes up with her stomach growling. The hunger is so intense that her adult reasoning begins to fade, leaving only a toddler's impulsive drive for food. While the maids frantically search for her, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 has already left her room. She wobbles through the dark, silent hallways, focused on one thing: num-nums. But as she rounds a corner, she trips, running straight into a pair of legs standing in the shadows. Even with the mind of an adult, some traumas are hardwired into the soul. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 knows she's taking a risk, but her tiny body is screaming for sustenance. She dashes through the dark corridors, her logic failing as her physical needs take the wheel. In this moment, the tactical regressor is gone, replaced by a hungry child. Dark memories of her time at 𝐤𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒆's mansion resurface, the cold attic, where she was locked away for days. She remembers creeping through the shadows back then, bare feet hitting the cold floor as she scavenged for scraps. The desperation of shoving raw potatoes into her mouth just to stop the gnawing pain returns with a vengeance. Back then, being caught meant being branded a beggar by the cruel staff. The trauma of starving to death in a previous life isn't easily forgotten. The void of hunger is a terrifying, endless black hole. She remembers seeing others eat simple street food that looked like a feast to her dying eyes. The golden, glistening skewers were a dream she could never touch. She can still feel the sensation of collapsing in the dirt, her life fading away while her stomach remained empty. Paralyzed by the fear of history repeating itself, she trembles, unable to maintain her composure. "I have to find something to eat," she cries internally, peeking around corners with wide, frantic eyes. She checks every hallway, every nook, searching for any sign of a meal. She even crawls along the floor, her desperation driving her to check under furniture for even a crumb. Her tiny feet patter toward a heavy door. She reaches up, straining to turn the handle. Inside, she spots a single, golden loaf of bread sitting on a table like a holy relic. Her eyes sparkle with tears of pure relief. "Found it, it's bread!" She grabs the prize and scurries back toward the hallway, planning to eat in the safety of her room. But in her haste, she slams right into a solid, towering figure. The world turns cold. Lightning flashes outside, illuminating the terrifying silhouette of Duke Theodore Double. The atmospheric pressure in the room drops as the Duke looms over her like a vengeful god. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 freezes, the bread clutched to her chest as she drops to the floor in terror. Her mind races back to a story Minna once told her about a man named John Valjean, a man who was hunted and imprisoned for the simple crime of stealing bread. She remembers the dark details of that tale and imagines her own grim fate, the cold blade of a guillotine. The chill of death brushes against her neck. "I might die," she screams internally. The Duke stares down at her, his voice a low growl, asking if her smart behavior was all an act, because she's a fixer for the Empress Dowager. She can barely squeak out a response as she cringes on the floor. Theodore's gaze is piercing. He despises liars, especially those who pretend to be on his side while hiding their true nature. He wonders aloud how he should handle this little rat. I'm sorry," 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 wails, the dam finally breaking. Tears stream down her face as she begs for mercy, her tiny hands clasped in prayer. The Duke blinks, genuinely confused. "For what?" he demands. She confesses through her sobs that she stole something. The Duke's mind immediately goes to high-stakes espionage. "Money?" he asks. She shakes her head. "A holy relic?" Another shake. "Military secrets," he roars, his patience snapping. "Sigh." With a final, desperate burst of air, she holds up her lute. Bread. The heavy, murderous atmosphere evaporates instantly, replaced by a stunned, awkward silence. The legendary Child of Fate is currently having a breakdown over a stale loaf of bread. Later, the scene shifts to a much warmer setting. The maids watch in a mixture of pity and adoration. Rhea steps forward, her heart breaking for the little girl. As 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 aggressively stuffs her face with the bread, the Duke sits nearby, looking completely out of his element. He watches her tiny feet kick as she eats. Rhea explains the heartbreaking truth. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 went to sleep early and missed the meal intended for the servants, so she scavenged the bread they were going to throw away. Theodore is speechless. "You mean she picked up and ate bread the servants discarded?" The realization hits the staff like a physical blow. They are overcome with shame for letting the guest go hungry. Theodore reaches out, perhaps to offer comfort, but the trauma is too fresh. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 flinches violently at his touch. She scrambles away and dives into Rhea's arms, clinging to her for dear life. The Duke's hand hangs empty in the air, a look of genuine hurt crossing his face as he's rejected by the child he just terrified. He doesn't understand why she's suddenly so afraid of him. His aide whispers that she's likely just scared of being in trouble. Tucked into Rhea's embrace, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 continues to sob. She had felt so safe with the Duke before, but the fear of execution was too real. Rhea's eyes sharpen with a protective fire. She declares that since the baby needs to finish her meal, she will be taking her leave immediately, effectively dismissing the Duke. The other maids gasp at her boldness, certain Rhea has just signed her own death warrant. Theodore stares her down with a terrifying intensity. After a tense moment, he sighs. "Fine." The maids don't wait for him to change his mind. They vanish in a blur of motion, carrying 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 to safety. Once they're clear, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 exhales, genuinely surprised she's still alive. The maids are in tears, praising Rhea's bravery for standing up to the villain Duke. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 looks down, apologizing for always being hungry. Rhea gently places her hands on the girl's shoulders. She pulls her into a warm, motherly hug, telling her that babies are supposed to eat and sleep a lot. Tears well up in 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's eyes again, But these are different. I want to live here, she thinks. Not for the power or the secrets, but because Ria is here. Days pass, and the morning sun shines brightly over the Dubald estate. The atmosphere has shifted completely. The maids greet 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 with beaming smiles, calling her my lady. They can't help but gush over how cute she is as she goes about her day. But peace is always fleeting. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 spots the Duke and his aide in the hallway. She immediately tries to sneak away, claiming she has to go study to avoid another terrifying encounter. Theodore stops her in her tracks. His aide suggests he try calling her name affectionately to show he's not a threat. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 pouts, thinking the Duke probably doesn't even know who she is. The Duke's icy blue eye locks onto her. Follow me, he commands. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is baffled but has no choice but to follow his lead. He leads her to a set of grand doors and pushes them open, revealing a room bathed in golden light and filled with flowers. I shall give this to you, he says, leaving 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 completely stunned. Give her what? As 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 steps through the massive doors, she pauses in confusion, wondering if she's walked into the wrong room. Duke Theodore stands nearby, his expression unreadable as he observes her hesitation, wondering why she isn't reacting the way he expected. He watches her closely, his sharp blue eyes searching for a sign of her typical fear. Breaking the silence, the Duke holds out a handful of shimmering, colorful candies. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's eyes widen to the size of saucers, her mouth literally watering at the sight of the sugary treasures. But that's just the beginning. The room isn't just a bedroom. It's a literal mountain of cookies, tarts, and pastries. It's a scene straight out of a dream, a candy kingdom built just for her. Overwhelmed with joy, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's face lights up with pure, unadulterated bliss. She doesn't hesitate for a second, diving headfirst into the pile of sweets like it's a ball pit. She stuffs her face with a cookie, momentarily forgetting her dignified regressor status in the face of such deliciousness. Realizing she's being watched, she sheepishly holds out a treat toward the Duke, offering to share her hoard. Theodore looks down at the tiny girl whose cheeks are puffed out like a hoarding hamster. He can't help but let out a dry comment, telling her she looks strange. He reaches down, gently pinching her soft, squirrel-like cheeks, his cold exterior finally beginning to melt. Seeing an opening, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 leans into the affection. She's determined to use her fourth life social skills to wrap this powerful man around her finger. Thanks, Duke, she chirps, intentionally leaning into the cute child act. A rare, genuine smile tugs at the Duke's lips as he acknowledges her thanks. Following the bread incident, a period of true peace settles over the estate. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 spends her days being pampered, though she still can't resist a secret snack. Her peace is briefly interrupted when she's caught red-handed by the maids after sneaking 7 candies. Even the staff is falling for her charms. The butler presents her with a gift, a precious elephant-shaped bag. She parades around with her new accessory, leaving a trail of awes from the smitten maids in her wake. However, today the atmosphere is different. The maids are meticulously dressing her in her finest lace and ribbons. Ria explains with a warm smile that today is the day 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 will be introduced to the family's retainers. The maids are practically vibrating with excitement, convinced everyone will faint from her cuteness. They mention that other sponsored children will also be in attendance. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 knows exactly what that means. On the surface, it's a traditional noble support system. In reality, it's a ruthless talent scouting operation. Prestigious families like the Dubalds find gifted children and mold them into loyal assets. These children receive elite education and social standing. In exchange, they become part of the family's powerful network. Because it comes with massive financial backing, the competition for these spots is fierce. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes that even the most ambitious provincial nobles would kill for a seat at this table. Ria offers her hand, ready to lead the young lady into the lion's den. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 takes it, her mind racing. If it's the House of Dubald, the sponsored children must be elite. As they walk through the grand, sunlit hallways, the weight of the occasion sets in. Every step brings her closer to the powerful men who help run the dukedom. They arrive at the meeting hall, where the retainers are already gathered. The nobles are busy praising a young boy named 𝒂𝒃𝒊𝒔𝒈, marveling at how sharp and precocious he is. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 knows she needs to make a flawless first impression. She steps forward with a radiant smile and a bright hello. The effect is instantaneous. The retainers are clenching their hearts, completely disarmed by her adorable greeting. But as 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 looks around, her smile falters. Her gaze lands on the genius boy Marco. A chill runs down her spine. She knows that face. She knows that smug, condescending smirk. In her previous life as the daughter of Duke 𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒆, she attended the academy. Back then, Marco wasn't a child, he was a professor. He was a man who used his position of power to harass her relentlessly. He had hovered over her, his presence suffocating and unwanted. He was a disgusting opportunist who coveted her status. He had tried to force himself into her life in the most revolting way possible. She remembers the horror of his unwanted advances, and how he tried to manipulate her. When she finally found the courage to fight back and report him, the nightmare only got worse. He didn't just deny it. He weaponized the social hierarchy against her. He pointed a finger at her and screamed that she was the one who seduced him. He had stood before the crowds, mocking her, asking why she didn't report it immediately if she hated it so much. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 remembers the cold, judging eyes of the public as she stood alone. She explains the painful truth. Victims are often too terrified and confused to understand what's happening when a superior harbors such dark intentions. He had screamed in her face, claiming she must have liked it since she didn't scream. But the truth was she was paralyzed with fear. She was so terrified her entire body froze. rendering her unable to make a sound. In the end, her protest meant nothing. The distinguished professor received a mere 6-month pay cut, while he walked away with a slap on the wrist. The world turned black for 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚. She was branded as immoral and expelled from the academy in disgrace. Back in the present, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's small fists tremble with rage. She tells herself to calm down, reminding herself that this 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is currently just a child. The young 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 stands before the retainers, basking in their praise as he shows off complex formulas he claims to have solved. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 knows it's a total lie. Even in the past, he was famous for being a fraud who paid real geniuses to do his work. She watches him with a cold, knowing stare. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 eventually comes over and sits beside her, putting on a front for the adults. But the moment they are out of the other's line of sight, his expression shifts into something sinister. He leans in close, checking to make sure no one is listening. He whispers a venomous insult, calling her a fake and telling her she could never beat him. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes with a start that this brat is actually trying to compete with a 4-year-old for sponsorship. She tries to ignore him, closing her eyes and treating him like background noise. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 won't stop. He looks at her with pure malice. He sneers, telling her that the Empress Dowager only threw her away into a trash heap, like 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, because she's worthless. His lip curls as he delivers the final insult. Trash belongs with trash, he spit. In her previous life, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 was naive and abandoned. She didn't know how to fight back. She could only lower her head and take the abuse. But she isn't that girl anymore. Her eyes snap open, glowing with a terrifying, vengeful light. She's died 3 times, and she isn't taking any more garbage in her 4th life. With a powerful whack, she slams her fist right into 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's smug face. She doesn't stop there, unleashing a brutal 5-hit combo that leaves the retainers and maids speechless. It's a total KO. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is sent sprawling, blood leaking from his nose. In 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's mind, she stands in a boxing ring, victorious, as her maids cheer for her win. The genius brat is left trembling on the floor, screaming in shock at the pint-sized powerhouse who just handed him his first defeat. The room falls into a stunned silence as the retainers witness the aftermath of the tiny lady's outburst. 𝑏 rushes to his son's side, his voice laced with panic as he demands to know what happened. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, ever the manipulator, points a trembling finger at 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, tearfully claiming she attacked him out of nowhere. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 isn't backing down. She raises her own finger, pointing straight back at the bully. With the perfect blend of childhood innocence and fierce defiance, she calls him out for being a bad kid. The retainers watch in confusion, unsure where this confrontation is headed. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 delivers the killing blow. She reveals that 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 called the Duke himself a piece of trash. The atmosphere in the room shifts instantly. For a moment, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 freezes, worrying she might have overstepped the bounds of noble etiquette. Instead, the retainers and maids are moved to tears, convinced this angel was simply protecting the honor of the 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 family. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 can only blink in confusion. She really just wanted an excuse to hit him. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 tries to double down on his lie, but it's too late. Duke Theodore steps forward, his presence alone enough to chill the air as he prepares to defend the child under his protection. Baron Jude desperately tries to play it off as a misunderstanding, claiming his son was simply upset. He clutches 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's shoulders, his face pale with fear. Theodore isn't buying the act. He offers 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 one terrifying chance. He demands the boy swear his words are true, even if his eyes were to be gouged out as punishment for a lie. Under that predatory gaze, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's composure completely shatters. The Duke asks one final time, is his child a liar or is 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚? 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 can barely breathe, his face contorted in sheer terror. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 watches silently, knowing that no one, not even a professional liar like 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, would dare lie to the Duke's face. Finally, the truth spills out of 𝐤𝒂𝒃's mouth as he collapses in fear. Baron Jude realizes his social standing is crumbling in real time, his grip tightening on his disgraced son. He falls to his knees, begging for mercy and claiming he's committed a grave sin. Theodore doesn't even grant them a second look, coldly ordering them to get lost. His eyes glow with a lethal intensity that signals the end of the conversation. The heavy footsteps of armored guards echo through the hall. They seize the screaming Baron and his son, dragging them away as they beg for a mercy that isn't coming. In the peaceful aftermath at the mansion, the retainers can't stop praising 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's splendid behavior. They gush over how she calmly explained the situation, completely misinterpreting her calculated revenge as pure bravery. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 recalls how 𝐤𝒂𝒃 looked down on her, calling her a cheeky thing. She had played the part of the pitiful guest perfectly, acting like she couldn't possibly cause a scene. But the moment he insulted the 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 name, she had her opening. She feigned outrage for the Duke's sake before delivering a flying kick that would make a martial artist proud. While her conscience stings just a little bit, she's satisfied with the result. She successfully made a glowing impression on the Duke's inner circle. When Theodore reaches out to pat her head, she flinches instinctively, still adjusting to this new life. She quickly hides behind a retainer, maintaining her shy persona. The staff finds it adorable, whispering about how she only seems to have eyes for the Duke. One aide smiles warmly, happy to see the young lady being loved. Theodore sits back, radiating power, while his men openly express their jealousy over his daughter's affection. He sighs, calling the whole ordeal a hassle, though his smug expression says otherwise. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 pouts, thinking it's unfair for him to act so bothered when she's working this hard. But as the saying goes, fortune follows hardship. Because of her heroic actions, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is granted permission to go out into the city. Accompanied by Rhea, she heads out to shop for supplies, her heart light with excitement. The city is a whirlwind of color and life, featuring street performers on balls and children enjoying cotton candy. People enjoy the afternoon at outdoor cafes as 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 takes in the sights of the bustling market. Suddenly, she stops dead in her tracks in front of a toy store. Her eyes lock onto a specific bunny doll in the window. It's a legendary item that's about to become the most popular toy in the empire. When hugged, the doll plays a recording that says, "I like you." Seeing the doll triggers a painful memory from her first life. A younger, tattered 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 had once begged her father for that very toy. Instead of a gift, he had given her a lecture, telling her that the money for the doll could save the starving. He had asked her coldly if she still wanted it, and the young girl, crushed by guilt, had forced herself to say no. He had praised her for being a good girl who chose compassion over a toy, but the truth was she had desperately wanted it. To make matters worse, years later, the Duke had given that exact same doll to Mina as a gift. Mina had hugged it tight, glowing with happiness, and the Duke had looked on with a smile. It was a smile far brighter and warmer than any he had ever shown 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚. It was a smile of genuine love, something 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 had never received from him. She shakes her head vigorously, trying to banish the dark thoughts of her past. Rhea notices her staring and asks if she'd like to buy a toy. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's eyes widen with joy. She realizes that Rhea is genuinely kind, unlike the people from her previous lives. They step into a luxurious toy shop filled with wonders. Rhea and the other maids encourage her to pick anything she likes. The staff watches with hearts in their eyes as the angel begins her search. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 looks around the room, her eyes darting from shelf to shelf. Finally, she stops, her finger pointing toward a specific item as she declares, "That one." Standing in the middle of a bustling market, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 spots something that stops her in her tracks, a bright red carnation. It hits her that gratitude day is just around the corner. She stares at the flower, her young face masking a mind that's lived through 3 previous lives. For those who don't know, Gratitude Day is a special tradition in this world. It's the one day a year when children present carnations to their parents to show their love and appreciation. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 looks at her small hands, weighing her options. She could buy a toy for herself, but she knows she can't let this opportunity pass by. She glances at the shelves filled with whimsical dolls and wooden animals, the temptation of a normal childhood tugging at her. But she quickly shakes off the urge, her expression hardening with a resolve far beyond her years. Pointing firmly at the flower, she declares her choice. Tis one. Her maid, Rhea, is caught off guard. She expected the little lady to want a doll, not a professional corsage. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 puts on her best innocent child act, explaining that she wants to give it to someone she truly likes. While Rhea is moved by the gesture, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's inner monologue is strictly tactical. She's giving this to Rhea to secure the maid's absolute loyalty, and maybe some extra snacks later. She briefly considers the Duke, but remembers his cold demeanor. To her, 𝐂𝒂𝒄 𝐤𝒂𝒄 is a terrifying wall of a man, and she's convinced that giving him a gift would only be a nuisance. She's terrified of getting on his bad side by being annoying. With the gift secured, the duo heads back to the sprawling 𝐤𝒂𝒄 estate. The castle stands as a monument of power, but inside, the atmosphere is about to get very awkward. 3 of the Duke's top retainers are walking through the hall, engaged in a very spirited conversation. One of them is proudly sporting a carnation on his chest. He beams, explaining that his daughter gave it to him for the upcoming holiday. He starts boasting about the incomparable joy of raising a child, claiming it's the ultimate happiness. The other retainers agree, noting that all the wealth and honor in the world mean nothing compared to a child's affection. Unbeknownst to them, Duke 𝐤𝒂𝒄 is standing right behind them, listening to every word. The retainers, oblivious to the danger, continue to dig their own graves, saying that anyone who hasn't received a carnation is truly pitiable. The Duke finally speaks up, his voice dropping the temperature of the room. "I wouldn't know." The retainers freeze, their faces turning pale with instant regret. 𝐤𝒂𝒄 stares them down, admitting with a chilling calmness that he has never once received a carnation. The retainers are internally screaming, "How is it possible that a man with 3 sons has never been given a single flower?" One tries to offer a weak excuse, suggesting that boys just aren't very delicate with their feelings, but the Duke doubles down, noting he's never even heard words of gratitude from his children. The air is thick with awkwardness as the retainers realize they've accidentally insulted the most powerful man in the room. They look like they want the floor to swallow them whole. But then, a ray of hope appears. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 enters the hall, carrying a beautifully wrapped gift. The retainers' eyes light up. They're convinced this is the moment the Duke finally gets his flower. They practically weep with joy, cheering for the angelic child who is about to save the Duke's pride. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is momentarily stunned by their intense reaction. One retainer is so excited he's practically doing a celebratory dance in his head. Even the Duke looks slightly expectant, his gaze lingering on the small child. The retainers urge her forward, telling her to give the gift to its rightful owner. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 blushes, looking shy as she clutches the flower. She reaches out, her small hand extending the carnation. But the rightful owner isn't the Duke. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 turns and hands the flower directly to Rhea, telling her how much she likes her. The retainers turn into stone statues, their souls leaving their bodies. Behind them, the Duke's face transforms into a mask of pure, unadulterated jealousy, his aura turning dark and heavy. The retainers realize too late that the angel just unintentionally dealt a critical blow to the Duke's ego. While Rhea is over the moon, hugging the little girl, the Duke looms in the background like a looming storm cloud. Rhea is moved to tears by the gesture, promising to treasure it forever. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is happy with her successful bribe, but she suddenly feels a terrifying chill down her spine. She looks up to find the Duke towering over her, his eyes glowing with an ominous intensity as he says her name. She squeaks in fear, wondering what she did wrong. Theodore looks her dead in the eye and asks the ultimate question, "Is there none for me?" 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 is baffled. She genuinely thought she was doing him a favor by not bothering him with such a trivial gift. As Rhea celebrates her flower, the Duke stands there, the saltiness levels reaching an all-time high. Days later, 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 is relaxing in her room, wearing a cute pair of bare ears. Her life in the palace seems comfortable enough. She looks out the window and sees Rhea passing by, still proudly wearing the carnation and humming happily. The flower has become Rhea's most prized possession. 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 smiles, glad that her investment in the maid is paying off. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. The Duke's aide arrives to escort her to the office. 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 jumps up, full of energy. Today is the day she has to report her progress to the Empress Dowager. The aide is impressed by her enthusiasm. As she leaves, the other maids wave goodbye to their favorite little lady. Walking through the grand corridors, 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 feels like she's finally finding her footing. However, they pass by workers moving massive crates. The aide explains that they are organizing gifts for the Emperor's upcoming birthday banquet. This triggers a dark memory for 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃. In a past life, she had tried to buy an expensive fountain pen as a gift, hoping to be accepted. Instead, she was met with cruelty. Her family at the time called her a leech who was living off their house. They dragged her away like trash, throwing her onto the floor of a cold attic. She overheard the other children asking why she was being punished just for wanting school supplies. The answer she heard broke her. Because she's not his real child. The memory serves as a brutal reminder. As a non-biological child, the margin for error is 0. She realized back then that she had to work 10 times harder than anyone else just to survive. Shaking off the trauma, 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 knows she has to win over Duke Theodore completely, or her chance at a stable life will vanish. They arrive at the Duke's office, and the aide knocks. The doors open to reveal the Duke sitting at his desk, wearing glasses and looking incredibly stern. 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 freezes, her heart sinking. She can't help but wonder why does he look so incredibly displeased to see her. Inside the Duke's office, the atmosphere is thick enough to choke a horse. Duke Theodore stares down with a gaze as sharp as a guillotine, looking every bit the cold-blooded ruler he's rumored to be. Little 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 stands frozen, her tiny heart hammering against her ribs as she tries to read the room. One of the Duke's retainers leans in, his shadow towering over the trembling 4-year-old as she tries to hide his legs. He drops his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, leaning down to meet her eye level. He assures her that the Duke isn't actually furious with her personally, but he's definitely fuming about something. 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 clutches her hands together, her big blue eyes wide with confusion. The retainer gives her the inside scoop. If she wants to fix this, she'd better prepare 2 carnations next time. It turns out, the powerful Duke of Dowager is suffering from a massive case of flower envy. The realization hits 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 like a lightning bolt. She spent a literal fortune of the Duke's money buying gifts for everyone in the mansion, but she didn't get a single thing for the man actually paying the bills. No wonder he looks like he's ready to declare war. She watches him work, feeling the weight of her mistake. If she just buys him a flower now, it'll look like a petty, forced apology. Her eyes ignite with a new fire. She needs to do something that will actually impress him. Digging through her memories of her past lives, she searches for any scrap of information that could be useful to the Duke. Suddenly, the air in the room shifts, turning heavy and oppressive. 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃's attention is drawn to a fancy jewelry box. But what's inside isn't a gem, it's a rough, dark pebble. Before she can even process what it is, a massive, glowing magic circle erupts from the box, bathing the room in a violent red light. The power is overwhelming, screaming through the air as 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 is caught right in the center of the magical surge. The world turns into a distorted nightmare. The people around her become ghostly silhouettes as a voice echoes directly into her mind, calling her, "My child." The sound doesn't come through her ears. It vibrates through her very soul. She's pulled into a vision of dark water and blooming red roses, the mysterious voice growing louder, announcing its arrival. Back in reality, the entire mansion begins to shake. The Duke slams his hands on his desk, thinking a volcanic eruption or an earthquake is hitting the territory. As the light finally fades, 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 stands shivering, wondering what on earth just happened to her. But the nightmare isn't over. Her body begins to move against her will, as if she's a puppet on invisible strings. Her hand reaches out and grasps the mysterious stone, which instantly crumbles into useless dust between her fingers. A collective gasp fills the room. The Duke and his retainer stare in absolute horror at the remains of the relic. 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 realizes she's in deep trouble, her face turning a ghostly pale. The retainer identifies the object as 𝐤𝐬𝒃𝒚. 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃's heart sinks. She knows that name. 𝐤𝐬𝒃 isn't just a rock. It's a sacred relic of the evil god, an item of incredible, terrifying power, and she just turned it into pocket lint. The retainer tries to soften the blow, telling the Duke that the storage method must have been faulty for it to disintegrate like that. But Theodore isn't interested in excuses. He looks away, his voice cold as ice as he calls the situation a nuisance. 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒃 begins to shake, her eyes welling with tears as she stammers out a broken apology. The Duke's expression remains unreadable, a wall of stone between him and the child. She clenches her dress, her mind racing. Instead of winning his favor, she's caused a disaster that could cost her everything. Theodore doesn't look at her, simply telling her not to be a further nuisance and to return to her room. The word nuisance cuts deeper than any blade. 𝐤𝐵lane's vision blurs, her legs finally giving out as the stress and magical exhaustion take their toll. She collapses to the floor, her small body looking fragile against the cold stone as the Duke watches in silence. Her eyes flutter shut, the world fading to black. The last thing she hears is the frantic scream of a maid calling out for her. In the darkness of her unconscious mind, memories of her previous life bleed through. She sees the silhouette of Duke 𝐤𝐵lane, the man she once called father. He was a man she respected above all others, a man she thought was righteous and benevolent. She gave up everything to be his perfect daughter, just waiting for the moment he would smile and call her name. He gave her a room. He taught her how to be a noble. He even ate meals with her, but the warmth never reached his eyes. He never truly saw her as his own child. The contrast was staggering when it came to Mina, the real child of fate. With her, he was a different man, warm, indulgent, and loving. For Mina, his smile was more radiant than anything 𝐤𝐵lane had ever seen. It was a smile that was never meant for her. In her dream, 𝐤𝐵lane stands in the shadow of that perfect daughter. She was told it was okay, that it was just the way things were, because Mina was the true savior. Mina was the one who brought rain to the parched earth and hope to the suffering. Young 𝐤𝐵lane made a silent vow to work harder. She thought if she just pushed herself more, her father would finally look at her. She sacrificed her sleep. She gave everything she had to others, crying in the dark, hoping her efforts would be enough to earn a shred of love. But the memory shifts, turning violent. Cruel voices call her a stupid brat. They hunt her down, mocking her for trying to hide. A massive hand looms over her, the voice calling her a cheeky little rat. She remembers the silhouettes of those who looked down on her, telling her she should just die in a gutter so they wouldn't have to deal with her corpse. The trauma of being called useless echoes in her mind. In her dreams, she begs for mercy, her hands clasped in prayer as she sobs, "Don't hit me." With a sharp gasp, 𝐤𝐵lane bolts upright in her bed, the nightmare finally shattering. She's drenched in sweat, realizing she fainted after the incident in the office. She huddles under the covers, the weight of the 𝐤𝐵lade's kindness clashing with her fear. They have been so good to her, but she's terrified that now, after the Nuit disaster, they will grow to hate her just like everyone else did. A massive crack of thunder shakes the room, lightning illuminating the darkness. 𝐤𝐵lane looks toward the window, her eyes narrowing as she notices something strange. Outside in the hallway, the head maid walks with a somber expression. The other maids gather, whispering in hushed, worried tones. Even the doctor doesn't know why the child hasn't recovered properly. The head maid enters the room to check on her, calling out softly. But when she pulls back the curtains of the grand bed, her heart stops. The bed is empty. The head maid's face pales with terror. A retainer bursts into the Duke's private quarters, his face twisted in panic as he screams for his grace. The Duke and his lead retainer spin around, their eyes wide with shock as the news hits them like a physical blow. 𝐤𝐵lane has disappeared. The mansion is in an absolute uproar. Staff members scramble through the halls, their faces etched with panic. Maids search every room, their desperate cries for the young lady echoing through the corridors. Theodore's expression is a mask of cold fury and suppressed dread. He's running through every dark possibility. Is this the work of an assassin? A kidnapping for ransom? Or have the elders who resent the child of fate finally made their move? Suddenly, a cry rings out. "Your Grace, she's here." Theodore freezes, his breath catching as he turns toward the voice. He rushes toward the source of the commotion. The staff's footsteps splash through the garden in the pouring rain. There, under the dark sky, they find her. 𝐤𝐵lane is a shell of herself, huddled on the ground and shivering in the mud. A maid reaches for her, desperate to pull her out of the freezing rain. But 𝐤𝐵lane is lost in a trance of trauma, her small hands trembling violently. Theodore looms over her, his presence usually a symbol of absolute power. But seeing the 4-year-old barefoot and broken, something in his gaze shifts. She forces herself to stand, her tiny, pale feet dragging across the wet stone. She holds out a single, crushed red carnation. With tears streaming down her face, she begs for forgiveness, sobbing that she did wrong. She is absolutely terrified, pleading for mercy as if her life depends on it. This isn't just about a relic. 𝐤𝐵lane is reliving the neglect of her past life, seeing the cold, dismissive face of Duke 𝐤𝐵lane telling her to stop being a nuisance. The memory of being discarded as useless flashes before her eyes. The maids watch in horror, realizing the depth of the child's desperation. Even the most stoic guards are moved to silence. Theodore is momentarily speechless. He stares at her, the weight of his previous coldness finally hitting him. He looks at her bare, freezing feet on the cold ground. She's still clutching that flower, waiting for the blow to fall. For the first time, Theodore feels a sharp sting of pity and deep regret for being so cold to her. Back in the castle, 𝐤𝐵lane is led to a large bathroom. She's convinced this is the end. She wonders if one flower wasn't enough to earn her forgiveness. She ruined her clothes and the relic, she's sure a harsh punishment is coming. Her mind jumps to the worst-case scenario, water torture. But the torture never comes. Instead, Theodore brings a basin of warm water. 𝐤𝐵lane looks up, completely bewildered. "Does it hurt?" he asks softly. The powerful Duke of 𝐤𝐵lade is on his knees, maintaining a strictly professional and gentle focus as he personally washes the mud from her feet. 𝐤𝐵lane can only shake her head no, her mind racing. The silence is heavy. She can't understand why he's being so kind. The water is warm, but his touch is even warmer. She realizes his hands aren't meant to harm, they're incredibly careful. Theodore breaks the silence with a stern but caring command, "Don't wander the castle at night." 𝐤𝐵lane looks up with wide, watery eyes. 𝐤𝐬𝐤𝐸? She asks in her tiny voice. He doesn't yell. Instead, he reaches out and gently taps her forehead. In a rare moment of tenderness, he gives her a small smile and confirms, "I'm not angry." 𝐤𝐵𝒁 is stunned, holding her head as if she can't believe she's finally safe. Days pass and the tension begins to melt. 𝐤𝐵𝒁 watches from the shadows, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Theodore is a man of his word. He didn't throw away her gift. He actually put the carnation in a vase on his desk. 𝐤𝐵𝒁 can't wrap her head around it. The man who supposedly slaughtered entire tribes out of irritation is now displaying her flower and eating meals with her. Her thoughts are interrupted by the maids. They're excited to take her to see the merchants. They explain that there will be many interesting things to see. 𝐤𝐵𝒁 agrees, thinking she needs to find a way to pay for the relic she broke. But first, they head to the library. 𝐤𝐵𝒁 is thrilled, acting like a typical, happy 4-year-old. The library is massive, a treasure trove of knowledge. The maids encourage her to pick a book. However, their suggestions are unconventional. One offers a guide on 101 ways to commit fraud. Another suggests a book titled, "Beat Them If They Deserve It." A third pushes even more useful skills. As the maids start brawling over which questionable lesson 𝐤𝐵𝒁 should learn first, she decides to find her own book. She needs something with a nice cover to maintain her "I can't read" act. She spots a strange, glowing volume without a title. Curiosity wins out. She opens it and sees text that shouldn't be there. It's a record of Emperor Fid defeating the demonic god Ivan. The text reveals the terrifying conditions to awaken an evil god, a divine relic, and the acquisition of a catalyst. 𝐤𝐵𝒁 stares at the pages, realization dawning as she wonders what secret she's just uncovered. 𝐤𝐵𝒁 stares at the ancient pages, the heavy weight of the book in her small hands, feeling inexplicably revolting as she reads about the unsettling rituals required to harness divine power. She questions why such a dark text would focus so heavily on the evil god, the very entity sealed away by the righteous deity, Nereid, to save humanity. But history shows that even the strongest seals aren't permanent, and as time passed, the chains binding the source of all began to wither. To prevent a catastrophe, a powerful relic was needed to reinforce the prison. In her past life, the Child of Fate was chosen to lead the ritual, but 𝐤𝐵𝒁 remembers the horrific truth: she was nothing more than a living sacrifice. Enduring a ritual so agonizing, she prayed for a swift end. The memory of that pain clouds her eyes until she's snapped back to reality by the library's quiet atmosphere. Her maid, Leah, peeks around the bookshelves, searching for her young charge. Instantly, 𝐤𝐵𝒁 flips the cute switch, trembling and whimpering that the 𝐻𝐻 in the book is too 𝐸 for her to handle. The act works perfectly, sending the maids into a fit of adoration as they coo over how precious she is for being frightened by a mere illustration. Internally, 𝐤𝐵𝒁 is stone cold, unimpressed by the bad lion the maids are teasing her about. She maintains the facade, shuffling out of the room with a practiced pout. Suddenly, Yanni appears at the door with an update. 𝐤𝐵𝒁's eyes light up with genuine interest as she asks if the merchant she's been waiting for has finally arrived. Yanni offers to take her to the audience chamber, and 𝐤𝐵𝒁 excitedly follows, eager to get down to business. The other maids watch them go, completely unaware of the tactical mind hidden behind that toddler's grin. They enter the grand audience chamber of the Dubald estate, a room dominated by the legendary tapestry of the founding emperor hanging behind the throne. This isn't just decor. It's a trophy from the frozen lands the Duke conquered years ago. A younger, battle-hardened Theodore once stood in the snow, his blade stained with the blood of his enemies to secure this very prize. Even the imperial palace once tried to claim the tapestry, but the Duke's grip was unshakable, leaving them to crawl in his shadow. Now it stands as the ultimate symbol of Dubald's military dominance, looming over Theodore as he sits on his throne. 𝐤𝐵𝒁 watches from the sidelines, knowing that this single item sparked a massive trend among the nobility. Every high-ranking noble in the empire began desperately decorating their halls with tapestries. Some went as far as commissioning cheap copies just to mimic the Duke's prestige. Heavy footsteps echo through the hall as a man approaches the throne. It's Merchant Turba. And the moment 𝐤𝐵𝒁 sees his face, her internal alarm bells start screaming. Turba offers a deep, theatrical greeting to the Duke, his voice dripping with forced humility. He bows low, presenting himself as a man of great honor. He claims to have found a relic capable of replacing the lost 𝐬𝐻, boasting that as a self-made man who rose from slavery, only he can provide items worthy of the high nobility. 𝐤𝐵𝒁 sees right through the act. She knows this man is a notorious swindler who once famously scammed the imperial family with a forged painting. He's a career criminal who has left a trail of chaos across the empire. As she watches him spin his web, she realizes he's bold enough to try and con the Duke of Dubald himself. With a flourish, Turba reveals his prize, a stone tablet supposedly containing an ancient, divine oracle. The Duke's advisors lean in, whispering that a relic of the main god is far superior to anything related to the evil god. They suggest it would be the perfect birthday gift for the Duke. Theodore remains composed, his gaze sharp and calculating as he asks if the merchant is certain this is a true oracle. Turba doesn't flinch, insisting the temple has already verified its immense divine power. The advisors are sold, praising the Turba Merchant Guild for their reliability. Turba leans into the drama, describing a harrowing journey through the highlands where he fought off monsters just to secure this stone. He raises his hands to the sky, shouting that he couldn't give up because he knew this tablet was destined to help someone. The performance is so over the top it actually brings the advisors to tears. Theodore, tired of the theatrics, demands a price. Turba's eyes gleam with greed as he names his fee, 100 million francs. The room goes silent as the advisors choke on the astronomical figure. Even Leblanc is stunned. That's a national budget level sum of money. Even for a house as wealthy as 𝐤𝐳𝒂𝒃𝒚, this is a staggering investment. But Turba doubles down, insisting it's the only object in the world that can replace the 𝐤𝐻𝒄. Leblanc realizes she has to move now or the Duke is going to get robbed blind. The advisors are still debating when Leblanc bursts forward with a joyful shout, acting like a curious child who just wants to play. She holds her hands up high, chirping that 𝐤𝐵U wants to see the pretty rock. Turba's eyes narrow as he recognizes the child of fate, seeing another opportunity to bolster his lie. He graciously invites her to take a closer look. While the advisors worry she might break the priceless relic, Leblanc runs straight for it. She kneels by the case, wearing a mask of pure innocence as she marvels at the stone. Turba laughs, jokingly suggesting that perhaps the child of fate can even read the ancient tongue inscribed on it. One of the knights scoffs, pointing out that she can barely speak the common language yet. But then, Leblanc opens her mouth and begins to read. Noto, who worked hard for his family, rests here. The room freezes in absolute, bone-chilling shock. Turba's face pales, his confident smirk replaced by a mask of pure terror. Leblanc looks up at him with wide, sparkling eyes and calls him a Mr. Dummy, pointing out that his divine oracle is actually just a commoner's tombstone. Internally, she sighs with relief, glad she intervened before the Duke wasted a fortune. The knights are left reeling, wondering how a toddler could possibly decipher a lost language. The ancient tongue is notoriously impossible to read, with only a handful of characters even known to the high priests of the temple. In the future, a living translation will eventually appear the real child of fate, Mina. But Leblanc knows the truth of this timeline. There are exactly 3 people in the entire world who have mastered the ancient tongue. The first is the future crown prince, Adrien Louergue. The second is the Duke's eldest son, Johann Dubald. And the third is Leblanc herself. The atmosphere in the room shifts instantly as Leblanc drops a bombshell. The merchant's claims are nothing but a fabrication. To prove his relic is a fake, she points out that the tombstone actually belongs to a site in Callisis. According to the map, Callisis sits on the exact opposite side of the old plateau, making the merchant's story geographically impossible. The court erupts in disbelief, the nobles demanding to know if this 4-year-old can truly read the complex ancient language. With a calm, resolute nod, Leblanc confirms their suspicions, leaving the room in a state of shock. Isaac stares at her, desperate to know if this impossible feat is actually happening. Playing the part of the innocent child, Leblanc puts on her best clueless act, chirping that she can definitely do it. When a frantic official presses her on how a toddler could possibly master such a tongue, Leblanc's internal monologue turns sharp. She's already prepared a perfect cover story. She recalls how Mina, the other child of fate, used to deflect similar questions by claiming the knowledge just showed up in her mind. By mimicking that same mysterious, divinely inspired aura, she watches as the memory of priests hailing Mina as a holy miracle flashes by. Leblanc realizes that as long as she holds the title of the child of fate, she can get away with anything. Merchant Turba, sensing his 100 million franc payday vanishing, screams that she's lying. He desperately claims the temple will back him up, mocking Leblanc and demanding she provide one shred of proof that she isn't just making things up. Leblanc meets his gaze with a cold, piercing stare that belies her age. The nobles whisper amongst themselves, noting that the only person in history capable of writing this language was the founding emperor himself. Theodore remains silent, his expression unreadable as he observes his daughter's brilliance. Turba continues his frantic defensive, refusing to back down, but Leblanc is 3 steps ahead. She prepares to deliver the final blow to his credibility. Unlike Mina, she is a suspected child of fate, and she's about to turn that suspicion into absolute certainty. She begins to recite the inscription. Blessed is the one who bears the mission. Then, she goes for the juggernaut, revealing the founding emperor's secret middle name, Semen. This is a historical nuclear bomb. The imperial family had spent centuries burning records to hide the emperor's commoner origins. They deleted that middle name from every public document in existence. With a bright, innocent smile, Leblanc tells Turba that since only the highest nobles like the Duke know this name, her reading it is undeniable proof of her literacy. The officials are floored, realizing they are standing in the presence of a true genius. They can no longer deny it. She is truly the child of fate. The realization turns into rage directed at the merchant. One official points a trembling finger, realizing they were nearly swindled out of a fortune. Turba, cornered and desperate, tries to claim he rose to his position through God's will. Duke Theodore finally speaks, his voice dripping with pure contempt as he calls the man pathetic for hiding behind God when he can't answer a child. The merchant's face pales, the sheer pressure of the Duke's aura crushing his spirit. Leblanc watches him tremble, thinking it's probably best if he just runs away now. It turns out the Duke was already suspicious of the gnats trying to climb over his walls. He stands up, his movements slow and menacing. His icy blue eyes law into the merchant, radiating a lethal intent. The room goes silent as the Duke delivers his sentence. He orders Nors to escort this divinely overflowing gentleman straight to the dungeon. As he descends the stairs, he demands a definitive answer regarding the stone slab. He clarifies that he'll get that answer one way or another, even if he has to slice the man open to find it. Isaac looks on, his face grim as the Duke's orders are finalized. "Yes, father," he replies, signaling the end of the merchant's freedom. Turbo reaches out one last time, begging for mercy, but he breaks immediately, confessing to every mortal sin and fraudulent act before the torture even begins. Later, in the privacy of the Duke's study, 𝐤𝐵𝒃 peeks over the desk at a new document. It's a sketch of a legendary holy relic in 𝐤𝐽. However, 𝐤𝐵𝒃 notices something strange. While Mina's 𝐤𝐽 was platinum, this drawing depicts one made of gold. Her eyes widen in shock as she realizes this is a second 𝐤𝐽, one the temple doesn't even know exists. Theodore leans back, realizing the merchant was trying to fund the purchase of this very relic. Isaac adds that it explains why Turbo was willing to risk everything on such a massive fraud. The Duke's hand rests on the parchment, contemplating the proof of divinity. Isaac explains that the relic is currently at the bottom of the sea. Specifically, it's located in foreign waters, missed by the Empire's border by a mere 10 meters. Because it's in another continent's jurisdiction, the Church can't intervene without sparking a global conflict. 𝐤𝐵𝒃 realizes the merchant's plan was to trade it to a foreign king for a king's ransom. Theodore looks at the map, his mind already working on a much simpler, more direct solution. Instead of a complicated diplomatic deal, Theodore calmly suggests they just wage war to take it. Isaac smiles, ready to begin the preparations, while 𝐤𝐵𝒃 stands there in disbelief, realizing that in the House of Dubald, war is just a standard business negotiation. Inside the Duke's office, the atmosphere is heavy with the weight of political maneuvers, as 𝐤𝐵𝒃 watches the powerful men of the Dubald household finalize their next moves. A staff member turns to her with a beaming smile, credits the little girl for their recent successes, and acknowledges her growing importance to the family's future. 𝐤𝐵𝒃 stands there, completely stunned by the sudden praise. She quickly connects the dots. Her intel led to the downfall of Newt, and now her value as a strategic asset has skyrocketed. Realizing she needs to secure her place in this house through more than just utility, she resolves to be a child who can stand on her own 2 feet without being a burden. With newfound determination, she reaches out and tugs firmly on the Duke's sleeve. Theodore looks down, his piercing gaze meeting her wide, innocent eyes. In a bold move to secure her future, 𝐤𝐵𝒃 throws her hands up and makes a heart-wrenching plea, "Please be my daddy." The room goes silent as the Duke stares back, seemingly frozen by the child's unexpected request. 𝐤𝐵𝒃's eyes shimmer with tears, her small frame trembling as she waits for a rejection that would ruin her 4th life. She's terrified of being a bother, her mind racing with the need to prove she's worth keeping. The tension between the Duke and his subordinate is palpable as they process the emotional weight of her words. 𝐤𝐵𝒃 doubles down, her voice small but clear, begging for the familial bond she's always been denied. Slowly, the Duke reaches out and scoops the tiny girl into his arms. He holds her securely, a rare moment of tenderness from the man known for his cold exterior. A soft, genuine smile finally breaks across Theodore's face as he looks at the girl he's decided to protect. 𝐤𝐵𝒃 clings to him, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and joy. For the first time, she feels like she isn't hated, and that maybe, just maybe, she's found a real home. Later, back in her room, 𝐤𝐵𝒃 is focused on a new, monumental task. With a grunt of effort, she manages the impossible. She puts on her own socks. Her maids burst into cheers, treating the simple act like a world-class achievement. They shower her with praise, calling her a literal genius for her motor skills. Fueled by the hype, 𝐤𝐵𝒃 gets a competitive glint in her eye she needs to show the Duke her independence immediately. The maids are just as fired up, ready to march their genius child straight to the master. They practically vibrate with excitement as they escort her to the office. The Duke is buried in paperwork when the doors swing open. He pauses his writing, sensing a tiny presence entering his domain. He looks up, his sharp eyes softening just a fraction. 𝐤𝐵𝒃 stands there proudly, holding her socks up like trophies and announcing her new skill in her adorable toddler speak. Theodore leans back, a smirk playing on his lips as he invites her to show him. 𝐤𝐵𝒃 is all business. She knows this is essentially an interview to prove she's adoption material, and not a needy infant. She takes her seat on the rug, ready to perform. She grips the sock, treating it with the intensity of a holy relic. The maids watch from the sidelines, cheering her on like she's in a high-stakes championship. 𝐤𝐵𝒃 goes through her mental checklist. Widen the hole, curl the toes, and pull. But disaster strikes. The sock gets stuck, and she's left fumbling as the genius facade begins to crumble. She struggles, her face turning red as she tries to force the fabric over her heel. Frustration boils over into a mini tantrum as she realizes she's failing her interview. In the background, the Duke's staff can't help but chuckle at the adorable display of effort. 𝐤𝐵𝒃 feels absolutely pathetic, the weight of her regression making her feel even more embarrassed by her physical limitations. The maids quickly jump to her defense, insisting she was successful just moments ago. But the Duke's expression turns serious. He tells her that while she lives in his castle, he expects constant improvement. This isn't just cruelty. Theodore is known for being brutally strict, having sent his own sons to far-off academies and boarding schools at a young age to ensure they grew strong. He tells 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 to keep practicing while he's away on a territory inspection, and she eagerly promises to be a good girl for him. The maids watch the exchange with warm smiles, seeing a family dynamic forming where there once only coldness. Even the Duke's aides comment on how much the child clearly adores the master. As the Duke allows a small smile to slip, 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 is more determined than ever to earn her place. The next day, the Duke departs for his inspection, leaving a quiet void in the castle. 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 wanders the halls, counting down the 20 days until his return. She looks for a secluded spot to practice her sock putting skills in peace, wanting to surprise him. But her peaceful morning is shattered by an angry, shouting match echoing through the corridor. She peeks around the corner to see the doubled staff in a heated standoff with a group of strangers. A man in a green cloak shouts that they've come to take the child of fate back. A representative from the church steps forward, coldly stating that since the Pope is 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃's legal guardian, they don't need permission to take her. 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 stands frozen in the shadows, her blood running cold at the realization. They've come to take her away. 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃's small hands tremble as the reality of her situation sinks in. If the church manages to reclaim her, this fourth life will end in the same tragedy as the others. She clenches her fists, her heart racing with a desperate need to survive. To understand the power struggle, you have to understand House Double. They are a family of legends, achieving unparalleled prosperity through a brutal, secret training method. They aren't just nobles. They are born in the blood of their kin and raised to be literal slaughterers. And at the apex of this mountain of corpses stands Theodore Doubled. He is the perfect version of his lineage, cold, calculating, and terrifyingly efficient. He didn't just maintain the family legacy. He doubled their assets with a heart of pure ice that overlooks all emotion. Miles away at the regional inspection office, the atmosphere is suffocatingly tense. Theodore's presence is so overwhelming that the soldiers can barely stomach their meal, fearing a single mistake could be their last. Suddenly, a sharp, rhythmic humming breaks the silence. The knights' heads snap toward the sound, their eyes narrowing as they detect the flow of mana. A young soldier freezes, caught red-handed with a glowing object. In this unit, carrying unauthorized magic tools is a crime that carries a heavy price. Terrified, the boy stammers that it's just for communication. He was using it to coordinate buying high-quality fabric for the young lady. The lead knight isn't moved. He demands the device immediately for inspection. The device activates, and the room is suddenly filled with 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃's voice. She's trying her hardest to say Duke, but it keeps coming out as a tiny, adorable Dookie. She looks devastated on screen, worried that her bad pronunciation will make the Duke hate her. The effect is instantaneous. The hardened soldiers burst into fits of laughter, their professional facades crumbling. They're completely smitten, gushing over how much the little lady clearly adores her father. Even the most stoic officers are seen hiding smiles behind their hands. Theodore watches the display with a piercing gaze, calling her unusual one. His men insist that anyone who doesn't find her cute must not be human. In response, Theodore's expression darkens, casting a shadow of pure malice over the room. A terrifying, spectral tiger seems to loom behind him, making the soldiers shiver in fear. She's not cute, he declares coldly. He claims he's never once in his life viewed another person as cute, but as the image of 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃's bright smile remains on the screen, Theodore's eyes linger a second too long. His brow furrows in what the soldiers interpret as pure displeasure. They panic, feeling their very blood vessels constrict under his icy aura. Desperate to save his life, one knight frantically changes the subject, mentioning that the surrounding regions have been restless lately. Theodore's attention snaps to him. The knight explains that bandits are running rampant just beyond the territory borders. He sighs in relief, thinking he's successfully distracted the Duke from his anger. Theodore tries to play it off. It's not his territory, so it's not his problem. But then, the knight mentions the bandits are specifically targeting and kidnapping children. Theodore's eyes widen with a sudden, sharp intensity. His mind immediately conjures a nightmare scenario where a bandit snatches 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 away while she cries out for him. He sits in silence for a moment, the gears turning. I can't leave those who roam boldly near my territory alone, he decides, his voice low and dangerous. The knights ask for clarification on the scope of the mission. Theodore begins by ordering the border to be cleared, but then his overprotective brain kicks into overdrive. He imagines 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 dressed as a lady, visiting a flower garden in the neighboring 𝐤𝐳𝐸 region, only to be ambushed. Clean up 𝐤𝐳𝐸 as well, he barks. He then thinks about her growing up and wanting to go horseback riding. He envisions her being kidnapped from a plain even further away. The Duke looks genuinely rattled by his own imagination. He then considers the river. What if she wants to play in the water? He sees her being taken from the 𝐤𝐳𝒻 River. His final order is insane. Clean all the way to the 𝐤𝐳𝒻 River. That's hundreds of kilometers of territory. The soldiers realize they've accidentally signed up to wipe out every bandit in the kingdom, just to satisfy the Duke's hidden papa instincts. Back at the Doubled estate, the sun shines through the windows, but the mood is frantic. A rustling comes from a storage chest as 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 tries to climb out. Her maid Rhea quickly picks her up, asking what on earth she's doing. 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 looks up with wide, serious eyes, asking for her elephant bag. Rhea finds the bag, but she's deeply confused by the request. 𝐤𝐵𝒂𝒃 tries to act natural, but her tiny boots are already pointed toward the exit. She feels a pang of guilt. She can't tell Rhea the truth. She grips the strap of her bag with all her might. She knows the church is coming, and Theodore is too far far away to protect her. If she wants to live, she has to run away right now. Time is running out for 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈. As she sprints through the halls, her mind is a whirlwind of survival tactics. She knows the Empress Dowager will inevitably side with the temple, and Duke Theodore is far too pragmatic to spark a war with both the church and the imperial family for a child he barely knows. If she stays, she'll be handed over to the Valois family, a place she knows from her past lives as a living nightmare. Once she's behind those gates, escape becomes impossible. She has to make her move during the transport to the capital. Step 1. Logistics. 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 slips into the kitchen, her tiny footsteps barely making a sound. When a maid spots her, 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 deploys her ultimate weapon, peak cuteness. She looks up with wide, shimmering eyes and asks for water. The staff, completely charmed, don't just give her a cup, they fill her entire elephant-shaped canteen to the brim. With her water supply secured and a hug to seal the distraction, she moves to the next phase. She's already smuggled a stash of food, but a growing girl needs energy. Her little feet dash toward the dessert table. In her mind, sweets aren't just treats, they're essential fuel for when she gets tired. She begins stuffing candies into her bag, realizing 2 or 3 won't be nearly enough. She crams the bag full, yet still worries that 30 pieces of candy might be a light snack for a long journey. After considering maps and clothes, she moves to the most critical resource. She ducks behind a curtain to retrieve her hidden treasure, a heavy pouch of gold coins she's been secretly collecting. She nuzzles the bag, whispering about her precious money. Suddenly, Rhea appears, catching her red-handed. 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 panics, stammering that she isn't planning anything. But Rhea's expression isn't one of suspicion, it's heartbreak. She believes the Duke is letting 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 go, and she gently pets the girl's head, wishing her a life filled with love in a better environment. 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈's heart aches. Rhea is just an employee, and asking her for help would only put the woman's life in danger. Rhea leads her to a final farewell snack where the other maids have prepared a fairy tale reading. They try to keep the mood light with puppets and stories, but the reality of her departure is too much. Maids burst into tears, hugging each other, and mourning the loss of the girl who brought life to the estate. Seeing their genuine grief, 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 realizes that compared to her past lives, this place was heaven. She breaks down, wailing for Dookie, realizing that despite his cold exterior, he's the one she truly wants to stay with. Rhea stands back, watching the child's distress while clutching a mysterious glowing gem. The dreaded day arrives. The atmosphere at the estate turns icy as the temple's representatives march in. The Duke's knights are wary of the sudden arrival, but the high priest remains smug, claiming they act on the Pope's direct orders, while the maids frantically pack blankets and snacks to ensure 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 isn't cold on the road. Rhea watches the priest with a sharp, calculating gaze. The high priest approaches 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 with a sickeningly sweet smile, asking if she's been well. 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 recoils, her body trembling with instinctual fear. He promises her a kind father in Duke Valois, but 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 knows better. In her past life, that man raised her with a whip. She realizes the temple isn't choosing a family for her welfare. They've chosen a puppet they can easily exploit once her powers manifest. And as the priest loses patience, his grip on her arm tightens like a shackle. 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 pleads, "No, I don't want to go," but he yanks her forward, causing her to cry out in pain. The priest's facade cracks, his eyes turning murderous as he threatens her with the switch for being a bad child. The smell of alcohol and the imagined sound of a leather belt trigger a massive trauma response. 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 begins to hyperventilate, her vision blurring as the past consumes her. The priest towers over her, annoyed by her collapse, but before he can do anything else, a voice like thunder cracks through the courtyard. "Take your hands off my daughter." The staff and the priests freeze in absolute shock. Theodore has returned, his hand reaching out to cradle 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈's tear-stained face, his presence alone shattering the temple's hold. The high priest stands frozen, paralyzed by the sheer weight of the Duke's killing intent. In his arms, 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 is a trembling wreck, her eyes brimming with tears as she faces the man who just rewrote her destiny. Theodore doesn't just look angry. He looks ready to erase the priest from existence. He seizes the man's hand in a vice-like grip, and with a chilling warning to deliver a message to the temple, he makes it clear. 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 is off limits. Pulling the child close, Theodore shields her from the lingering tension. Even as 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 sobs into his chest, the Duke maintains his stoic, almost harsh exterior, calling her ugly for crying so much. Yet, his actions speak louder than his insults as he holds her firmly, telling her she needs to wash her face if she wants to be seen. With the Duke's point made, No steps forward with a sharp smile, ushering the stunned church officials toward the exit. The priest's confusion is cut short by a literal boot out the door. As the sun sets over the sprawling doubled estate, the message is sent: the church has lost this round. Inside the manor, the staff is eager to help. The butler reaches out to take the young lady, but Theodore snaps at him to back off. 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 isn't letting go either. She clings to the Duke's coat like a lifeline, terrified of being separated from her protector. The servants watch in absolute disbelief. Their cold, untouchable master is being treated like a human shield. 10-14, 10-16. Theodore sighs, claiming the child really likes him, and demands they all leave. The 10-15, 10-18, 10-19. Once the room is cleared and the doors are shut down, 10-20, 10-21, and 𝐤𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈 realizes the magnitude of what just happened. He called her his daughter. Seizing the moment, she plays the part of the precious, vulnerable child, pleading to stay and promising to be good. 10-23, 10-24, 1025. Theodore looks down at her and finally drops the bombshell. I will adopt you. 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 is overwhelmed as the reality of her safety sets in. For the first time, the Duke's touch is surprisingly gentle as he pats her head, telling her it's time to sleep. 1028, 1029. Finally feeling secure, 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 drifts off in the arms of the most powerful man in the empire. The next morning, it's official. She is now 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 Doubled. She realizes just how terrifyingly influential her new father is. He broke a priest's arm, and instead of a trial, the emperor personally bribed the church to keep them quiet. 1033, 1034. 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 is thrilled. This is the perfect cover. She plans to act like a perfect child for 5 years, save up a massive travel fund, and then disappear before anyone can use her. 1035, 1036. She immediately begins her fundraising by charming the maids. When she asks for buttons, the staff is so smitten they start ripping the expensive jewelry right off their uniforms. And 1037, 1038, 1040. Even the most stoic maids can't resist her. Soon, 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 has a collection of high-value gems disguised as trinkets. However, the peace is shattered when Lord Terramore and the Senate arrive at the castle. As 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 peeks through the window, she locks eyes with a sinister old man whose gaze feels like ice. The encounter leaves her visibly shaken. Sensing the danger, the maids quickly draw the curtains, shielding her from the predatory eyes of the Senate. The household routine is changing. Instead of the Duke eating alone in his office, 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 is led to the main dining hall. She can't shake the feeling that she's seen that creepy old man before, but those thoughts vanish when the doors swing open. Inside, she's greeted by 2 young boys, the Duke's sons. 1057, 1058. As she comes face to face with her new brothers, 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 realizes that surviving the Duke was only the first step. Theodore looks down at his daughter with a rare softness, calling her name as the formal introductions begin. 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 waddles forward, her tiny heart racing as she prepares to face the rest of the doubled bloodline. The Duke picks her up with ease, showcasing his new daughter to the 2 young masters standing before them. Meet Henry, the second son, and Isaac, the third. They share the Duke's striking silver hair and piercing blue eyes, but their auras couldn't be more different. 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 quickly notes that the eldest brother is still studying abroad, meaning she only has these 2 mini-dukes to win over for now. Theodore's gaze is sharp and expectant as he makes the introduction official. This is 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚. The name carries a new weight, and 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 feels the pressure as she stares back at her new siblings. Henry offers a polished, gentle greeting that feels almost too perfect to be sincere. Isaac, however, isn't interested in being polite, his eyes already narrowing as he observes the new addition to the family. The silent tension between the brothers is broken only by Isaac's cold, dismissive energy. 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 feels incredibly small in their presence, envying their height and the natural authority they already command. But she knows the truth from her past lives. These aren't just children, they are the future powerhouses of the empire. Isaac is a martial arts prodigy, destined to become a warrior of unparalleled skill. In the future, he'll be known as one of the empire's 4 great knights, a man described by his enemies as a violent, unstoppable force. In her previous life, these 2 were famously known as Mina's Knights, the ultimate guardians of the girl, who would eventually replace 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚. The memory of her past misery causes her heart to shrink with a sudden, sharp fear. She nearly floats away in her own anxiety, wondering if she can truly survive living under the same roof as these future monsters. She clenches her tiny fists, resolving to stay on their good side. If she doesn't irritate them, maybe she won't have to tremble in fear anymore. Time to activate the harmless child protocol. She flashes a bright, innocent hello to her new brothers. Henry responds with a smile that looks like it was plucked straight from a fairy tale. Even Isaac's icy exterior seems to thaw just a fraction under the weight of her sheer cuteness. But once the public dinner ends and they're behind closed doors, the masks slip. The atmosphere in the study turns freezing. Isaac looms over her, his voice dropping to a low, intimidating growl as he stares her down. His first question, "Can you eat carrots?" He's dead serious, and his glare is terrifying. 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 is completely baffled. Is this a test of her lineage or just a weird obsession? Isaac snaps, calling her a rabbit, and mocking her small stature while Henry watches from his desk. Meanwhile, Henry is focused entirely on a parchment filled with complex, high-level calculations. He works with a level intellectual intensity that shouldn't be possible for a child his age. 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 peeks at his work, her eyes nearly popping out of her head as she sees the advanced math he's casually solving. Henry notices her snooping immediately, demanding to know what she's looking at. Isaac accuses her of plotting, while Henry casually mentions he's busy building a slush fund. 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 is floored. A kid knowing the inner workings of secret financing? This family is absolutely insane. Isaac tries to jump into the intellectual fray, suggesting they should stock up on iron for an upcoming war. Henry shuts him down instantly, calling his younger brother's logic shallow and ill-informed. Isaac is furious, insisting his merchant-style thinking is the right way to handle the situation. But Henry explains the harsh reality. Nobles are forced to donate iron to the state during war, so gold is the only asset that truly holds value. 𝐤𝐵𝒃𝒚 realizes she's dealing with actual geniuses. These kids are far more dangerous and calculating than she ever imagined. Isaac turns his aggression back on her, pointing a finger directly in her face. He warns her, if she looks down on him for his lack of financial foresight, He won't hesitate to be violent. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 quickly plays the cute and confused card, swearing she would never ignore or mock him. Isaac's ego is instantly stroked, a smug, satisfied grin spreading across his face. He boasts about his own strength, warning her not to get cocky just because she's a child of destiny. Henry watches the display with a look of pure, unadulterated exasperation at his brother's antics. Then Henry's tone turns chillingly professional. He speaks of the cold reality of the doubled household. He looks at 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 with a dark, knowing smile that sends shivers down her spine. The doubleds don't spare even blood relatives. He warns her that as an outsider, she is in even greater danger. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's head spins. The complex politics and lethal threats are too much for her 4-year-old brain to process. Henry's shadow looms over her, his final warning about her shortening her life hanging heavy in the air. She doesn't understand half of their technical jargon, but she knows her best defense. A well-mannered child is a loved child. She lets out a beaming, radiant yes that fills the room with light. The brothers are completely stunned, their faces turning a bright, shocked shade of red at her sudden outburst of joy. The heavy, threatening atmosphere evaporates instantly, replaced by a confused, awkward silence. Isaac eventually bursts out laughing, his tough guy act completely shattered by her innocence. They stare at her in disbelief, wondering what on earth is wrong with this kid as she stands there, glowing with pure, tactical cuteness. As 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is led away with a triumphant, radiant smile, she has no idea she's being watched by eyes filled with suspicion. Henry, the family's resident genius, stares her down, his mind racing as he tries to decipher her true nature. He's convinced her innocence is a calculated mask, questioning if she's a master of deception or simply a wild card in the doubled household. To a strategist like Henry, age is just a number. He knows better than anyone that children can be the most dangerous players of all. He's spent his life surrounded by snake-like peers at the elite academy, and even his older brother, a prodigy in his own right, is an idiot compared to Henry's razor-sharp intellect. In Henry's imagination, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 isn't a toddler, but a cold-hearted schemer moving chess pieces, someone who managed to report the Pope's business to the family and couldn't possibly be clueless. He narrows his gaze, refusing to let his guard down for a second. The warnings of Senator Terramore echo in his mind, painting 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 as a child of fate, who uses her charms to manipulate the Duke. The senator's voice is a frantic hiss in his memory, warning that her presence threatens Henry's very position in the family. Henry resolves to keep a clinical, watchful eye on her, even as he finds himself physically frustrated by the sheer absurdity of the situation. His internal struggle is interrupted by Isaac, who catches Henry in a moment of uncharacteristic agitation. Henry immediately snaps into a defensive posture, insisting 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 isn't cute at all, while Isaac, blushing furiously, desperately tries to claim he hasn't fallen for her charms either. But one look at 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's round, chubby face is enough to test any warrior's resolve. Isaac feels a strange tingling in his throat, a physiological reaction to her tactical cuteness that he tries to suppress with sheer willpower. He decides that instead of falling for her like the wake adults, he will assert his dominance through bullying. He confronts the toddler with a stern, imposing aura, determined to show her who's boss. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, however, just looks at him with those massive blue eyes, wondering what on earth is wrong with this boy. The silence between them is thick enough to cut with a sword. To break the tension, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 offers him a snack, but Isaac isn't here for treats. He leans in close, delivering a chilling warning. She must never covet a position that is above her. Henry watches from the sidelines, completely baffled by his brother's behavior. He realizes that the moment Isaac treats this toddler as a legitimate threat, he's already lost the battle. Isaac prepares his scary ultimate move, a display of power meant to strike fear into her heart. He produces a loaf of bread and declares he'll eat it right in front of her without sharing. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is genuinely stunned by the sheer pettiness of the act. Watching from afar, Henry can only conclude that both of his siblings are idiots. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's internal adult logic begins to fray. She's so annoyed by Isaac's spiteful display that she considers grabbing him by the hair. But she catches herself getting violent would mean being kicked out of the mansion. She shakes her head, playing along and promising not to covet his bread. Isaac, thinking he's won a psychological victory, finally smiles, calling her a good kid. Seeing an opening, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 turns on the waterworks, whimpering about the bread with teary eyes. Isaac's resolve crumbles instantly. Grumbling that it can't be helped, he offers her half of the loaf. She takes a bite, and the explosion of sugar is so stimulating she practically wants to dance. The two siblings sit together in a rare moment of peace, bonding over the snack, with Isaac pretending he just picked up whatever was there. The peaceful moment is shattered by approaching footsteps. It's Rhea, the maid, who is shocked to find them snacking. She reminds 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 that she was forbidden from eating sweets before her strawberry feast later. Without missing a beat, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 points a finger at Isaac, shamelessly blaming him for the transgression. A flustered Isaac is forced to take the hit, blushing as he admits he gave it to her. Rhea lets it slide, touched that the young master shared his food, and pulls 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 into a warm hug. As Rhea carries her off for a nap, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 waves a cheery goodbye to her victim. Isaac is left standing there, his face glowing red with a mix of embarrassment and confusion. Later, he sits alone, brooding and doubling down on his lie that she isn't cute at all. Back in her room, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is tucked into bed by a smiling Rhea. who is convinced the young masters are finally warming up to her. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 knows the truth. Henry and Isaac don't like her, not yet. She stares out with a gaze far too old for a 4-year-old. Knowing she can't afford to be complicit, she has to survive this household until she can secure her exile. Looking at the images of her cold, powerful brothers, she knows the path ahead is dangerous. But as the barriers between them begin to crack, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 clenches her tiny fists with iron determination. She will do whatever it takes to get on their good side and secure her future. Сцена пропущена через помилки генерації 𝐴5 або провалу валідації. The atmosphere in the doubled mansion takes a chilling turn as a sinister presence reveals itself. An old man, 𝐴𝒂𝒗, reaches out with a hand that seems to carry a heavy, oppressive weight. He finds a gentle touch, commenting on how soft children's hands are, but his eyes betray a much darker intent. As he strokes 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's hand, his thoughts are twisted. He believes that as long as the children remain gentle and submissive, he won't have to resort to his whip. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's blood runs cold as she stares up at him, paralyzed by a sudden, sharp realization. Looking into his eyes, a memory from her first life flashes before her like a bolt of lightning. She remembers this man. In a past timeline, 𝐴𝒂𝒗 was a desperate coward, screaming about being sent abroad to escape his crimes. She recalls him standing in the grand halls of power, a man of low character used as a disposable pawn to expose the evil deeds of noble families. The truth hits her hard. 𝐴𝒂𝒗 is the same monster from her past, and he hasn't changed a bit. The predator begins to move, leaning over the young masters and announcing that he will be overseeing their studies personally. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes with a jolt of panic that he's trying to isolate her brothers to begin his cycle of abuse. But this is her 4th life, and she isn't about to let history repeat itself. With a pair of lungs that would put a drill sergeant to shame, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 lets out a piercing scream for 𝐵𝒂𝒃𝒃. The high-ranking aide and knight, North, arrives on the scene instantly, his presence acting like a physical shield against the old man's malice. North's gaze is steely and uncompromising, signaling that 𝐴𝒂𝒗's games are over for now. 𝐴𝒂𝒗's face contorts in visible annoyance as his pre slips through his fingers, while a chibi 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 strikes a smug, victorious pose in the background. North demands to know what business brings such a busy man to the training grounds, while 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 internally cheers like a little devil. 𝐴𝒂𝒗 forces a fake, hollow smile, claiming he only came to greet his disciples. Realizing he's been outmaneuvered, he retreats into the shadows, leaving a lingering sense of unease behind. As the brothers watch him leave, the tension remains thick. North and the other knights suspect the elders are the ones pulling 𝐴𝒂𝒗's strings, using him to exert control over the Duke's heirs. North leaves 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 under guard while he goes to report this to the Duke. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's mind is already racing. She knows that fear always shows, and she's determined to find out which of her brothers is currently being targeted by 𝐴𝒂𝒗's hidden cruelty. Her eyes land on Henry. He looks shaken, his usual composed demeanor cracking under the weight of a secret trauma. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 settles into a chair provided by North, observing the brothers closely. She debates telling the Duke immediately, but she knows she lacks hard evidence. If she speaks up now, 𝐴𝒂𝒗 will simply claim any bruises were sustained during rigorous training, making 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 look like she's making up stories. She watches Henry intently, searching for a sign. Henry stands tall, his arms crossed in a defensive posture. Suddenly, the air in the training hall shifts. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's eyes widen in absolute shock. Isaac steps forward, and the ground seems to tremble as he unleashes a massive, roaring blue aura from his sword. This isn't just talent, it's the legendary aura of the Holy Knights, a power reserved only for the world's top elites. Isaac moves like a blur of light, his speed and power overwhelming. He strikes his training partner with such force that the man is forced to surrender instantly. But Isaac doesn't stop. He looks down at his opponent with cold, terrifying eyes, declaring that in a real clash, losing means death. He looks like a literal demon of war, ready to end the match permanently. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is genuinely terrified by this side of her brother. However, as Isaac's gaze shifts to 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, his entire world changes. Through Isaac's eyes, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 isn't a scared kid, she looks like a glowing angel surrounded by flowers. Realizing he's accidentally scaring her with his intensity, Isaac completely panics. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, meanwhile, is busy taking mental notes to never, ever mess with Isaac. To hide his embarrassment and soft heart, Isaac huffs a boring and walks away, leaving his training partner weeping with relief that the young monster got bored. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 sighs in relief as the tension breaks, watching Isaac walk off to cool down. But the real surprise is just beginning. Henry steps onto the field next. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 wonders just how strong Henry could be, considering he's the one being bullied by 𝐴𝒂𝒗. As the match resumes, Henry prepares himself. Then it happens. Henry releases an aura that is even more refined and suffocating than Isaac's. With a single, sharp movement of his eye and a flick of his power, a massive wave of energy erupts. His opponent is blasted across the hall before they can even blink. Henry stands in the center of a swirling vortex of power, the undisputed victor. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's jaw hits the floor. The opponent is out cold, completely dominated by Henry's overwhelming strength. As Henry stands there, looking like a calm god of destruction, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is left with one burning question. If Henry is this insanely strong, Then why on earth is he letting a weakling like 𝐤𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒊𝒈 lay a finger on him? 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 watches from the sidelines, her mind racing as she questions why a powerhouse like Henry would ever let himself be pushed around by a pathetic old man like 𝐤𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒄. As the training session continues, the atmosphere grows thick with tension. 𝐤𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒄 raises his training sword, but Henry's cold, piercing gaze suggests he's miles ahead of the instructor. The blades clash with a violent ring, and while Henry's movements are fluid and precise, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 senses something is fundamentally wrong. She watches the sparks fly, realizing that if Henry actually fought back, 𝐤𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒄 wouldn't stand a chance. Despite the sheer power Henry displays during his maneuvers, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 knows his previous opponents were far more formidable than this aging tutor. Henry pauses, his expression unreadable as he senses the little girl's intense focus on him. Nearby soldiers whisper, assuming the young master is simply going easy on the old veteran. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 isn't buying it for a second. Her tactical cuteness, mask slipping as she analyzes the situation with the wisdom of a regressor. 𝐤𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒄, sensing the disrespect, begins to lose his temper, his face contorting with rage. He bellows at Henry not to look down on him, swinging his blade with reckless, emotional force. The strike connects, grazing Henry and drawing blood. Instead of countering, Henry completely freezes, his eyes wide with a sudden, paralyzing fear. As 𝐤𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒄 looms over him like a shadow, he prepares to strike again while Henry remains defenseless. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's heart stops. She knows Henry is about to get seriously hurt. Without a second thought, she sprints onto the field, throwing her tiny arms out to shield her brother. The soldiers gasp in horror as the 4-year-old disrupts the session. Henry looks down in absolute shock, his icy blue eyes meeting her determined ones. She can see the blood soaking into his shirt, and she grabs hold of him, refusing to let go. With her face flushed red with anger, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 screams at the tutor to stop hitting Henry. 𝐤𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒄 stammers, trying to claim it's just training, but 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 shuts him down, declaring that attacks driven by emotion are nothing but pure violence. 𝐤𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒄 cowers, sweat beading on his forehead as the toddler calls him out in front of everyone. He tries to offer a pathetic apology, but Henry has finally found his voice, coldly barking out a single word: enough. Henry turns his back on the tutor, his posture rigid as he walks away from the training ground. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 watches him leave, her eyes filled with concern as she realizes the depth of the scars he's hiding. Henry clutches his side, the physical wound paling in comparison to whatever is happening in his head. He looks back, his gaze haunted and distant. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 doesn't let him escape, charging after him and shouting to ask if he's okay. She corners him on the stairs, insisting that they need to treat his injury. Henry is baffled by her persistence, and 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 wonders if he's simply afraid of doctors. She tries to comfort him, telling him the doctor grandpa is nice, but the mention of an old man causes Henry's face to crumble. He snaps, shouting that he isn't scared of doctors, he just hates old men. The pieces finally click for 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚. A dark puzzle begins to form in her mind as she recalls the history of the doubled family. She remembers hearing rumors about the previous duke, Cain Doubled, a man known for his absolute ruthlessness. This old man was a monster who had no room for weakness. He had even killed his own second son, Chris, right in front of his grandson. The reason? Chris was considered flawed. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes with a jolt of horror that Henry was that grandson, the child forced to watch his own father be murdered by his grandfather. The memory of that trauma is what paralyzes him now. To Henry, having a flaw means death. He has spent his entire life suppressing his trauma because he believes that if he shows any weakness, he will be discarded just like his father. The realization hits like a physical blow. 𝐤𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒄 knew about this trauma all along. That disgusting tutor used Henry's fear of old men and his obsession with being flawless to keep him silent about the abuse. Henry is covered in hidden scars, both physical and mental, all because he's terrified that reporting the abuse would reveal his flaw to the Duke. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's fists tremble with a righteous fury. She forces herself to take a deep breath, knowing she needs to stay calm to play her cards right. 𝐤𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒄 is a high-ranking member of the Senate. His word carries more weight than a 4-year-old's. If she speaks up and Henry denies it out of fear, she'll be the one who looks crazy. In the worst-case scenario, she could even be sent away from the estate. But then she looks at Henry, who is still shivering from the encounter. Seeing her brother, the supposedly God-tier warrior, trembling like a leaf, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes she can't just stand by. Her conscience won't let her. Henry tries to brush her off, asking what she's doing, but 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 just gives him a soft, reassuring smile. She reaches out, her small hand a beacon of warmth in his cold world. She makes a silent vow she will protect him. Henry stares at her, his eyes wide as he registers the sincerity in her gaze. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 decides that since she's stuck here anyway, she'll repay the kindness the brothers have shown her by taking out their trash. A dark, predatory smirk crosses her face as she prepares for war. She's lived 4 lives, and she's going to use every survival skill she's ever learned to destroy that old 𝐤𝒍𝒻 once and for all. Deep in the castle gardens, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 enjoys a peaceful moment with her maid, Rhea, surrounded by vibrant violets. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 isn't just playing. She's tracking the time. It's exactly 4 p.m. Realizing that person is about to arrive, she suddenly shivers, acting as if the afternoon air has turned biting. When Rhea suggests heading inside, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 firmly refuses. Instead, she presents Rhea with a beautiful, handmade flower crown, overwhelming the maid with so much joy that she's easily distracted. With Rhea busy and the guards' attention elsewhere, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 begins her move. She sends Rhea off to fetch a coat and blanket, ensuring she's alone. As Rhea disappears toward the Duke's office, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 lets out a devilish, satisfied giggle. Her trap is set. We flash back to yesterday, where 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's information-gathering mission began. She boldly enters the Duke's study, putting on her most innocent face to greet him. The Duke tries to maintain his stoic facade, but even he can't hide his soft spot for the baby of the house. He assumes she's there simply because she likes him, but 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's true objective is much more calculated. Intel. While acting cute, she listens as the Duke discusses a proposal for a new advisory body. She knows that by staying close to the seat of power, she can uncover the leverage she needs to destroy 𝐤𝒂𝒧r. As the sun sets on the study, the political secrets flow. The Duke's aide mentions potential vacancies among the elders, and 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's ears perk up at the mention of 𝐤𝒂𝒧r. She learns that 𝐤𝒂𝒧r has a bitter, sworn enemy, Lord 𝐵𝒂𝒃. Their rivalry is a silent, high-stakes war within the nobility. A light bulb goes off in 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's head if she can weaponize 𝐵𝒂𝒃's hatred. She won't even have to get her own hands dirty. Back in the present, a prestigious carriage pulls up to the gates. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 spots her target immediately. The gate swings open as butterflies flutter through the air, revealing the crest of a family that has served as elders for generations. Out steps the head of the 𝐵𝒂𝒃 family, Viscount 𝐼𝒂𝒃 𝐵𝒂𝒃. He looks down with a sharp, cold gaze. He recognizes the child of fate and asks why she's out in such chilly weather. This is the exact opening 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 was waiting for. She looks up with wide, sparkling eyes and claims she's waiting for Grandpa Terra. 𝐵𝒂𝒃's face sours instantly at the mention of 𝐤𝒂𝒧r. He scoffs, calling 𝐤𝒂𝒧r a shallow old man from a feeble family. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 plays the part of the knave defender, shaking her head and insisting that Grandpa is actually awesome. She drops the ultimate bait. She claims 𝐤𝒂𝒧r told her he's going to be awarded a really cool crimson robe. This robe is the ultimate symbol of the elder's power. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 is stunned into silence. His shock quickly turns to pure, unadulterated fury. That seat was supposed to be his. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 twists the knife deeper, pretending to be confused as she adds that 𝐤𝒂𝒧r called 𝐵𝒂𝒃 an idiot who will cry tears of blood while watching him take the robe. Blinded by rage, 𝐵𝒂𝒃 storms off to handle business. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 watches him go with a tiny, triumphant smirk, mentally cheering him on to go tear 𝐤𝒂𝒧r apart. The scene shifts as the council doors are slammed open. The elders are in a full-blown panic over the Duke's plan to establish a new advisory body, which would make their council obsolete. They turn to the chairman of the council, Jean-Marc Noyenok. Noyenok remains chillingly calm, swirling a glass of dark wine. The corrupt elders realize they are losing their grip on the Duke. They decide they must find a new master who will serve their interests. Noyenok watches through the red tint of his wine, looking every bit the mastermind. He summons 𝐤𝒂𝒧r, reminding him that the young masters are the future of the house. He orders 𝐤𝒂𝒧r to teach them with sincerity, meaning brainwash them to align with the elders' agenda. 𝐤𝒂𝒧r, a snake to the core, assures him that the preparations are already complete. While the elders share a dark laugh in the background, 𝐵𝒂𝒃 stands nearby, his fist trembling with a rage that threatens to shatter everything. The grandeur of the estate masks a den of vipers, where 𝐤𝒂𝒧r basks in the shallow praise of his peers. They toast to his impending rise, whispering that the Duke is finally ready to grant him the elder's robe. He plays the part of the humble servant perfectly, but behind that practiced smile lies a lifetime of resentment. For 𝐤𝒂𝒧r, this isn't just a promotion, it's a long-awaited vengeance. Born of a lowly family, he spent years watching younger, high-born men steal his opportunities. But the chairman is watching now, and the chance to finally secure his status has arrived. He looks at the doubled hairs not as students, but as tools to be broken. He's already sized them up. Henry, burdened by deep-seated trauma, is his primary target. And Isaac? 𝐤𝒂𝒧r believes the boy is far too simple a bit of mental pressure, and he'll shatter like glass. As he envisions his triumph, his mind twists with the dark satisfaction of the power he's about to wield. He can practically feel the elder's title within his grasp, a grin of pure malice stretching across his face. The board is set, and in his mind, he's already won the game. But the political landscape is never that simple. Viscount 𝐵𝒂𝒃 approaches, offering a congratulatory word that drips with hidden venom. He mocks the very idea of 𝐤𝒂𝒧r's seniority, loudly reminding everyone that 𝐤𝒂𝒧r's distinguished service began as nothing more than a common house servant. 𝐤𝒂𝒧r's eyes flare with a murderous glare as the insult lands. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 doesn't stop there, openly ridiculing 𝐤𝒂𝒧r for carrying the habits of a servant into the classroom. He leans in, his voice a low, terrifying whisper, claiming to know every single one of 𝐤𝒂𝒧r's hidden weaknesses. The tutor's composure cracks, his face pale as 𝐵𝒂𝒃 delivers the final blow, a warning not to covet a position far above his station. 𝐤𝒂𝒧r's hands tremble with a violent, suppressed rage. Internally, he's screaming, possessed by the urge to tear the Viscount to pieces for this humiliation. From a distance, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 watches the seeds of chaos she planted begin to bloom. She steps out with a confident stride, her sharp eyes scanning the fallout. It's working perfectly. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 is playing dirty, aggressively manipulating public opinion to ensure 𝐤𝒂𝒧r is seen as unfit. He's pulling every string available, using school ties and regional connections to bury the tutor's reputation. By highlighting Isaac's dropping grades, 𝐵𝒂𝒃 is making 𝐤𝒂𝒧r's removal look like a necessity for the family's future. The court is already whispering that 𝐵𝒂𝒃 would make a far better elder. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 can't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. As long as these two are at each other's throats, 𝐤𝒂𝒧r will be too distracted to lay a finger on Henry. Even the maid's playful competition over who can entertain her better with with rocking horses and massive puzzles can't distract 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 from her mission. She plays along with their games, maintaining her innocent facade while her mind remains sharp and focused. But then she spots Henry. He tells her he's finished his lessons early because he aced his tests, while Isaac is stuck in a retest. Cold realization washes over 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚. There is no world where the genius Henry fails a test that Isaac passes. He was held back on purpose. Sensing immediate danger, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 sprints toward the training room. She bursts through the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Inside, she finds a scene that makes her blood run cold. Henry is on the floor trembling. She realizes she was wrong. This isn't just a brainwashing attempt. Terramore is standing over him, wearing a sickeningly polite smile. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's teeth clench. She sees the truth. Terramore is venting his lifelong inferiority complex by physically and mentally striking a noble child. When she accuses him, he has the audacity to laugh it off, asking how he could ever strike his young master. He justifies his cruelty as an act of love and care, his eyes closed in a mask of feigned righteousness. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 sees right through the lie. This man finds genuine pleasure in hurting those he views as his betters. As Terramore reaches for a tool on the desk, telling her not to interrupt his lesson, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 moves with a speed no 4-year-old should possess. She snatches the sharp object first. In a flash of steel and a spray of red, she drives the point deep into Terramore's hand. The tutor screams in agony, clutching his bleeding limb as he recoils in shock. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 stands tall, shielding Henry, her eyes burning with ancient, terrifying intensity. With a chillingly calm voice, she throws his own words back at him. "I'm just showing you some love and care, you bastard." Henry stands frozen, his mind racing as he stares at the aftermath of the confrontation. He can barely whisper the words, "What on earth?" But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 doesn't hesitate. She reaches out a tiny hand, her voice soft but commanding as she tells him, "Let's go, Henry." Henry is paralyzed, unable to comprehend why this small child is acting with such sudden, overwhelming authority. She leads him toward the light of the doorway, leaving a screaming Terramore in their wake. Behind them, Terramore's face is a mask of pure, unadulterated rage, his features twisting as he glares at their retreating backs. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 stops for just a second, casting a chilling glance over her shoulder. Her eyes glow with a predatory intensity that would make a grown man shiver. She doesn't need words. Her gaze says everything. Her silent promise hangs in the air. The Duke is going to find out exactly what kind of monster he really is. The weight of that threat hits Terramore like a physical blow, leaving him trembling with a mix of fury and dawning fear. The two children walk through the silent, opulent halls of the doubled mansion. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 stays close to Henry's side, her small frame a strange contrast to the heavy atmosphere. She looks up at him with wide, pleading eyes, begging him to see a doctor for his injuries. But the trauma runs deep. Henry recoils, jerking his hand away from her touch. He explodes in a panic, shouting at her, asking if she's lost her mind, or if she's simply too young to understand the danger she's in. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 flinches, startled by his sudden outburst. Henry continues to lash out, warning her that Terramore is a vile man, and that she'll live to regret crossing him. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 doesn't blink. With a maturity that defies her age, she tells him flatly that she isn't scared of Terramore. She knows that the physical pain is nothing compared to the psychological prison Henry lives in, the constant, crushing fear of what might happen tomorrow. Henry's spirit seems to break further, his face obscured by shadows as he tells her to just forget it. When she tries to insist that no child should have to hurt like this, he pushes her away again. He gives her one final, desperate command. "Don't tell anyone what happened today." He walks away, leaving her alone in the massive corridor. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 watches him go, her expression hardening into one of absolute resolve. Meanwhile, Terramore is spiraling. He storms through the mansion, cursing under his breath. He clenches his fist, his mind consumed by thoughts of the cursed brat who dared to defy him. He can't get her eyes out of his head, those cold, piercing blue eyes. He realizes the pressure she exerted wasn't that of a normal child. In his twisted mind, she isn't a child of fate. She's a demon sent to ruin him. Driven by panic, he races toward the one person who can save his reputation. He tells himself he won't let a toddler get the better of him. He reaches the Duke's office, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knocks, desperate to get his side of the story in first. He bursts into the room, but the words die in his throat when he hears the Duke already discussing his actions. Terrified that 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 has already exposed his abuse, Terramore falls right into the trap. He interrupts frantically, begging the Duke to listen to him first. The Duke and Isaac turn to look at him, their faces cold and suspicious. Terramore blabbers on, swearing on his life that he would never dare harm the young master. The room goes deathly silent. The Duke narrows his eyes, repeating the words, "Young master." His gaze is like ice, cutting right through Terramore's pathetic facade. Isaac looks equally baffled, wondering why the tutor is bringing up the young master at all. Terramore freezes, his face draining of all color as he realizes something is horribly wrong. His eyes bulge in shock. In a flash of realization, he sees 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's mocking face in his mind, sticking her tongue out at him. She never said a word about the abuse to the Duke. That was just the bait. She acted suspiciously on purpose, just to make him panic and confess. He thought he held all the cards, believing his status and credibility were untouchable. He relied on Henry's trauma-induced silence to keep his secrets safe. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 played on his own guilt, tricking him into looking guilty before he even knew what the charges were. Isaac clarifies the situation with a lethal calm. They were only discussing how he shouted at 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 earlier, but now, because of his suspicious outburst, he's practically signed his own confession. 𝐤𝐳𝐸 looks down on him with contempt as the trap snaps shut. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 wears a smug, kitten-like grin. 𝐤𝒂𝒧's world crumbles as the final thought hits him. He's been completely played. The trap has snapped shut, and the predator is now the prey. In the heart of the doubled estate, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is unraveling. He points a trembling finger at 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, desperately shouting to the Duke that the child has twisted his words. But Isaac isn't buying the act. With a cold, piercing gaze, he declares that until 𝐤𝒂𝒧's innocence is proven, he is barred from teaching the young master. The weight of the doubled authority settles in the room. Isaac demands a full confirmation of the facts, leaving no room for excuses. Even Lord 𝐵𝒂𝒃 steps forward, lending his voice to the call for a formal investigation. Above them all, the Duke sits in chilling silence, his eyes fixed on the man who dared to harm his sons. 𝐤𝒂𝒧r can only stammer, the realization of his total downfall finally sinking in. Stripped of his pride, 𝐤𝒂𝒧r retreats through the dark hallways, his footsteps echoing like a funeral march. Once alone, his facade shatters. He slams his hand against the wall, cursing the cursed little brat for ruining a perfect plan. Suddenly, a sound makes him freeze. He whips around, his eyes wide with terror. There, standing in the shadows with a chillingly sweet smile, is 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚. "What's the matter, Grandpa?" she chirps, her voice dripping with fake innocence. 𝐤𝒂𝒧r loses it. He snarls that he'll expose her as a demon sent by the temple, but 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 doesn't flinch. She simply tilts her head. "Grandpa, you're so silly." She points out the obvious. He just admitted he has something to hide. In the eyes of the Duke, he's already a liar. Who would believe a word he says now? 𝐤𝒂𝒧r shakes with rage. He's lost everything: the Duke's trust and the support of the elders. In a fit of desperation, he lunges forward and grabs 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's arm. But he's forgotten who he's dealing with. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's eyes glow with a terrifying blue light as she reveals her true nature. "My nickname used to be Dog." The air grows heavy with a murderous aura. A massive, spectral hound looms behind her as she delivers a cold ultimatum. "Touch me, and I'll bite. So let go of my hand. Or should I crush yours?" She stares him down, completely unfazed. He thought he could scare her because she's a child, but he couldn't be more wrong. 𝐤𝒂𝒧r recoils, visibly shaken by the sheer power radiating from this 4-year-old. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 reminds him that she survived the back alleys as a beggar. Compared to the horrors she's seen, his noble threats are nothing more than an itch. With her point made, she walks away humming, leaving the broken man in the dust. The consequences are swift. An official notice is posted. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is suspended indefinitely pending the investigation. The once proud tutor is reduced to a shadow of his former self, slumping over his desk in total defeat. With 𝐤𝒂𝒧r out of the picture, Lord 𝐵𝒂𝒃 steps into the power vacuum as the new elder. He beams with success, looking every bit the victor. When he spots 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 in the garden, he greets her with a warm, saintly smile. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is momentarily confused by the sudden change in his demeanor. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 looks like a literal Buddha of benevolence. He thanks her, realizing that her antics were the catalyst for his promotion. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes she's just earned a very powerful ally. Playing the part of the perfect child, she cheers for him, sending heart arrows of cuteness that leave the new elder completely charmed. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 tells her to never hesitate to ask him for anything. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 beams another high-level connection secured. As 𝐵𝒂𝒃 heads off to a meeting, 𝐤𝒂𝒃's expression shifts back to a serious focus. She needs to check on Henry. She cautiously peeks through the library doors, trying to be as quiet as possible. "What are you doing?" A voice booms from behind, making her jump out of her skin. It's Isaac, standing with Henry. He demands to know if she was trying to spy on them. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 stammers out a denial, her face turning bright red. She insists she just wanted to look. Isaac narrows his eyes, clearly suspicious. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 worries that if she admits she's checking on Henry's trauma, he'll get angry again. Meanwhile, the maids are buzzing with rumors. They know 𝐤𝒂𝒧r is coming back for the investigation and fear he might lash out again. Lee warns that a man who has hurt a young master once is capable of anything. She vows to keep that monster away from Henry at all costs. Back in the library, Isaac crosses his arms. "So that's why you're here, right?" 𝐤𝒂𝒃's heart sinks. Does he know? Did he figure out that 𝐤𝒂𝒧r targeted Henry? Isaac leans in, his eyes wide with excitement. "So you heard today's snack is khaki?" 𝐤𝒂𝒃 stares at him in dead silence, completely speechless. Maybe she thinks Isaac is a bit more simple than she gave him credit for. Isaac tries to play it cool, offering 𝐤𝒂𝒃 the remaining sweets with a casual shrug. The sight of the decadent chocolate cake, topped with a perfect cherry, immediately sends 𝐤𝒂𝒃 into a state of pure bliss, her eyes sparkling like diamonds. Isaac crosses his arms, putting on a sunder act and claiming he didn't save the treat specifically for her. He insists he simply isn't a fan of sweets, maintaining his stoic facade while 𝐤𝒂𝒃 happily digs it. However, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 quickly calls his bluff, pointing out that he was definitely eating some earlier, sending Isaac into a defensive panic. As the sugar rush fades, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 turns her focus to Henry, observing him with a sharp, calculating gaze. She breathes a sigh of relief seeing him standing tall, seemingly free of any immediate after-effects from his recent ordeal. Henry remains composed, though a hint of his usual intensity lingers in his eyes. The trio gathers in the study, a momentary peace settling over the room as they move past the day's drama. Isaac watches 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 enjoy the dessert, a small, genuine smile finally breaking through his tough exterior. Overwhelmed by the kindness, 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 declares that Isaac is the absolute best. Her eyes aren't just full of admiration, they are literally reflecting the image of more cake. Her appetite is bottomless as her tactical mind. Isaac, completely falling for her charm, promises to bring her more treats the next day and even at dinner. He blushes furiously, telling her not to like him that much, while Henry watches the exchange with a more serious, shadowed expression. The atmosphere shifts as the sun begins to set. Night falls over the estate, casting long shadows across the windows. The children are huddled over their books, but the long days are taking their toll. 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚's head begins to heavy nod as she struggles to stay awake. Henry notices her fatigue and gently suggests she head to bed. 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 snaps back to alertness, her eyes wide with a sudden surge of adrenaline. She flatly refuses to sleep, her mind racing with the need to stay vigilant. She continues her work with a quill, determined to push through the exhaustion even as her body demands rest. She tries to stay focused, her feet dangling beneath the table as she fights the urge to drift off. Leaning in close, she whispers a crucial, secret instruction to Isaac while Henry is preoccupied with his studies. Eventually, she excuses herself, walking through the silent halls while feeling the immense weight of overusing her adult brain for days on end. She is physically and mentally drained, her internal monologue screaming for sleep as she pushes her 4-year-old body to its limits. Stumbling through the dark corridor toward the washroom, 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 lets out a massive yawn, her guard seemingly down. Suddenly, a terrifying, weathered hand reaches out from the darkness. 𝑇aramor lunges, grabbing 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 and muffling her screams, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unhinged malice. He slams her against the wall with a heavy thud, trapping her. The disgraced tutor pins her down, his desperation radiating off him in waves. 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 glares back, refusing to be intimidated. She warns him that unlike Henry, she isn't under his thumb, and any harm he does to her will be exposed instantly. 𝑇aramor, completely losing his grip on reality, reaches into his robes for a secret weapon. He sneers that physical violence isn't the only way to break a person. He reveals a glowing blue spinel, a rare and dangerous artifact. This specialized gem is a technical tool used to extract divine power. The higher its saturation, the more energy it can forcibly drain from a target. 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes the stakes this gem could rob her of everything she's built. 𝑇aramor rants about how she ruined his 30-year career and caused the chairman to abandon him. As he closes in, 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 warns him to stay back, threatening to alert the entire household. Just as the situation turns dire, a foot crashes into the scene. Henry charges in with a desperate shout, throwing himself between 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 and the madman. 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 is stunned. She knows Henry's trauma should make it impossible for him to resist 𝑇aramor. Yet here he is, protecting her. In the struggle, the blue spinel is shattered, its fragments scattering like shards of glass. 𝑇aramor's face contorts with rage as he glares at the boy who dared to defy him. He grabs Henry, calling him a cursed wretch, as he prepares to lash out. 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 screams for him to stop, but the tide is about to turn. A powerful, glowing presence begins to fill the hall as heavy footsteps approach. The Duke of Dumbledore arrives in a swirl of divine mana, flanked by his elite guards. 𝑇aramor pales, his voice trembling as he realizes the master of the house has found him. 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 drops her facade of fear, her eyes narrowing as she delivers the final blow. She wasn't wandering alone by accident. She reveals that her exhaustion was the bait, and the whisper to Isaac earlier was the signal to call the Duke. The trap has snapped shut, and for 𝑇aramor, it's finally over. Isaac stands frozen, his face a mask of disbelief as he takes in the chaos of the room. Nearby, the staff can only watch in stunned silence as the situation spirals out of control. 𝑇aramor cowers on the floor, while a shaken Henry struggles to process the trauma. 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚, sensing the tension, clings to the Duke's side. Henry looks up, his face flushed with the after-effects of the magic spinel. 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚's small hands grip the Duke's clothing tightly, her only anchor in this storm. 𝑇aramor stammers out a pathetic excuse, his voice trembling with fear. He reaches out, pleading for mercy from the man who holds his life in his hands. But Duke Dumbledore's gaze is like ice, devoid of any pity. With a sudden burst of power, the Duke strikes, leaving 𝑇aramor screaming in agony as the weight of his crimes descends. Isaac realizes the gravity of the situation. This isn't just a tutor's mistake, it's a major incident that could wipe out the entire Senate. The Duke turns his piercing eyes toward his son, demanding the truth. Henry flinches, caught in his father's suffocating aura. "Tell me with your own mouth what has been happening," the Duke commands, his presence looming over the children. He clenches his fist, making it clear that he alone will be the judge of 𝑇aramor's fate. 𝑇aramor tries one last time to claim it's all a misunderstanding, his face distorted with desperation. He is silenced instantly, thrown back by an invisible force as 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 watches. 𝐬𝒂𝒃𝒚 is awestruck, realizing the Duke just used high-level magic without a medium, a feat that should be impossible. He stands bathed in a terrifying radiant light, a true monster of power. Henry tries to deflect, calling the abuse a laughable matter to hide his own shame. He claims he was simply waiting to see how far the tutor would go, refusing to admit his vulnerability. The Duke's patience snaps, his voice booming as he calls Henry's name, terrifying everyone in the room. Terrified for Henry, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 lunges forward, hugging the Duke's leg and begging him to stop. The Duke looks down, his expression unreadable as Isaac and the maid stare in pure shock. Henry is paralyzed. No one has ever dared to stand up to their father like this. Internally, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 is screaming she knows she's clinging to a monster. But she can't let Henry face this alone. She looks at Henry and sees past the cold exterior. She sees a child who is just as scared as she is. But Henry can't handle the pity. He brushes past his father, his eyes shadowed with resentment. His teeth clench as he fights back tears of frustration. Without a word, he bolts from the room, desperate to escape. The ornate hallways blur as 𝐤𝒂𝒃 chases after him. "Henry!" She cries out, her small feet pounding against the carpet. She manages to grab his sleeve, trying to pull him back. Henry violently yanks his arm away, shouting at her to let go and stay out of his business. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 stands her ground, shouting that he isn't a defective product despite what he's been told. Henry freezes, her words cutting through his defenses. She admits she's scared too of pointy things and frogs, trying to show him that fear doesn't make him weak. She wraps her arms around his leg in a protective embrace, promising to be his shield. Henry stands motionless, his blue eyes wide with a mix of shock and confusion. The dark memories of being called a defective product by the Duke flash through his mind, fueling his self-loathing. When 𝐤𝒂𝒃 reaches out her hand to take him back to their father, Henry snaps, slapping her hand away with a look of pure venom. He sneers, reminding her that they aren't real siblings and that no one considers a bloodless orphan to be family. "Get lost," he growls, his voice dripping with rejection. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 stands frozen, her heart sinking as she watches him. Henry turns his back on her, walking alone into the shadows, leaving the bond they almost formed shattered. The Doubledore estate is buzzing with frantic whispers as the truth of the tutor's actions begins to leak through the halls. Inside the quiet rooms, the weight of the situation hangs heavy, with Henry sealing himself away from the world in a desperate bid for privacy. 𝐤𝒂𝒃, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and resolve, finally reveals the horrific truth. Henry was being physically abused in the study. Isaac's rage boils over instantly, his voice cracking as he curses the tutor and demands to know why his brother suffered in silence for so long. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 watches the brother's reactions closely, choosing her words with calculated care to ensure she doesn't accidentally wound Henry's fragile pride any further. The Duke stands in a chilling, cold silence, his mind racing through the political and personal ramifications of this betrayal. With a sharp, decisive motion, he grips the arm of his chair, the sound of wood creaking under his power as the order for retribution is finalized. He commands that Terramore be thrown into the deepest dungeon for an interrogation that will leave no stone unturned. Isaac pushes for a full-scale assault on the Council of Elders who planted the tutor, but the Duke has a different, more secretive priority. The brothers are stunned to learn that the Duke intends to keep the details of Henry's abuse a total secret from the public. The Viscount argues that this is their best chance to crush the Council once and for all, using the scandal as leverage. But the Duke's eyes grow cold and terrifying, his patience wearing thin as he orders everyone to clear the room immediately. Isaac tries to protest, desperate to understand why his father is passing up such a golden political opportunity for revenge. "Lev," the Duke thunders, his gaze piercing enough to silence any further debate. The shock of his raw, overwhelming intensity sends a shiver down their spines, forcing them to retreat without another word. They lead 𝐤𝒂𝒃 away, the atmosphere thick with the unspoken tension of a family at its breaking point. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 casts one last glance back at the closed door, her mind piecing together the Duke's true, hidden intentions. As they walk through the corridors, the others wonder if the Duke is simply trying to avoid a civil war by not dismantling the Council. They search for a logical reason, unable to reconcile the Duke's cold demeanor with the crisis currently destroying Henry's spirit. Isaac sighs in frustration, believing his father appears more interested in cold politics than his own son's suffering. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃 knows better. She sees a pattern in the Duke's history that the others have completely missed. She recalls the Duke's past, where he lived under the crushing thumb of the previous Duke, acting as a relentless weapon. He performed every dangerous mission and dragon subjugation without question, no matter how much he loathed the orders. He did it all because his children were being held as hostages, proving his loyalty has always been to his family first. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 realizes that hiding the abuse isn't about political cowardice, it's the ultimate act of protection. If the Duke used this incident to destroy the Council, the entire empire would learn of Henry's weakness and trauma. He is intentionally giving up a perfect political victory to ensure Henry's dignity remains intact in the eyes of the world. Every cold calculation the Duke makes is, in reality, a shield for his traumatized son. He noticed the depth of Henry's pain long before anyone else did. He knows that exposing the tutor's crimes would mean exposing Henry's vulnerability to their many enemies. The Duke envisions the horrors Henry faced, refusing to let that shadow define his son's future or standing. A child of a powerful house is always at risk once their weakness is publicized, and the Duke will now allow Henry to become a target. Alone in his study, the Duke's stoic mask finally slips, revealing the heavy, silent burden of a father protecting his own. Night soon descends upon the estate, the beautiful flowers outside belying the deep turmoil within the castle walls. Isaac and the staff coordinate a total lockdown, ensuring that not a single word of the day's events escapes the gates. The guards bicker in the hallways, their rough exterior masking a deep, professional concern for the young master's well-being. Henry lies motionless in bed, the moonlight filtering through the window as he remains trapped in his own dark thoughts. Suddenly, the door creaks open, and a small figure slips into the room as quietly as a ghost. Henry stays perfectly still, his eyes closed as he feigns sleep to avoid any more painful confrontations. But beneath his eyelids, his blue eyes are wide and alert, filled with an unbearable sense of loneliness. He curls into himself, the weight of his trauma pressing down on him in the heavy silence of the night. The darkness of the room mirrors the isolation he feels, believing he must face his scars alone. He listens to his own faint breathing, waiting for the intruder to leave so he can sink back into his solitude. The door opens wider, spilling a sliver of warm light across the floor and breaking the darkness. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 peeks in, her expression full of worry as she checks to see if the young master is truly resting. She steps inside, her small frame dwarfed by the massive bedroom as she slowly approaches the bed. She whispers to herself, wondering if Henry is truly asleep or if he is just hiding from the world. Henry catches a glimpse of her through narrowed eyes, his heart racing as he watches her move closer. Convinced he's unconscious, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 carefully climbs onto the bed beside him to reach his injuries. She pulls out a small container, her movements deliberate and focused on the task at hand. Its wound ointment is simple but vital remedy for the physical pain he's been hiding. With incredible gentleness, she applies the cream to the marks on his neck, her touch light as a feather to avoid waking him. She nearly slips, scrambling to regain her balance without making a sound. Her eyes swirl with dizzying panic for a moment, terrified she's accidentally ruined her secret mission of mercy. Henry remains motionless, but the wall he built around his heart is starting to crumble under her kindness. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 lets out a soft sigh of relief, looking down at him with nothing but pure, sisterly affection. She gently pats him, whispering that everything is going to be okay, offering the comfort he never asked for but desperately needed. In that moment, a metaphor for healing takes root, like a new sprout emerging from the frozen ground. Henry finally breaks, tears silently streaming down his face as he realizes he no longer has to be alone. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 stares down, her heart heavy with a familiar weight. She knows this darkness all too well. In her past lives, she was the one being beaten by Duke 𝐤𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒆, and later, rotting away in a cold prison cell after being framed for a crime she didn't commit. Back then, as she withered away in the shadows, her soul screamed for just one thing: a person's touch. She desperately needed anyone to hold her hand and whisper that it would be okay, that there was a tomorrow worth waiting for. Now, she provides that very warmth to Henry. Gently, she finishes tending his wounds, whispering a soft, "It's okay, baby." Fearing his reaction if he catches her, she quickly retreats toward the door, scurrying out of the room as fast as her small legs can carry her. But Henry wasn't asleep. He sits up, his expression unreadable as he mutters, "Dummy, who are you calling a baby?" He reflects on his own cruelty, remembering how he lashed out at her, mocking her status as an adopted sibling just to keep her away. He used anger as a shield, hiding the fact that he was absolutely terrified. For years, Henry lived in a nightmare. Every time his tutor, 𝒂𝒗 raised a hand, Henry didn't just see a teacher, he saw the ghost of his grandfather. In his mind, his own father's voice would join the chorus, screaming that he was a defective child who failed to meet expectations. He felt shackled by a legacy of abuse that stretched back generations. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 changed everything. Her simple promise to protect him was his salvation. The chains that bound his heart have finally shattered. The next morning, the double-door mansion is buzzing. Maids peek through the doors, whispering about the chaos unfolding in the high offices. The political landscape is shifting. 3 elders who supported 𝒂𝒗 have been ousted, and a new advisory body has been established. The council is in a total tailspin. Lee keeps a watchful eye on 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 while the staff gossips. The maids realize the chairman only yielded because 𝒂𝒗's abuse was about to go public, a scandal that would have annihilated the council's reputation. Leah cuts through the chatter with a chilling glare, silencing the room instantly. While the maids celebrate 𝒂𝒗's miserable state in the dungeon, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 remains quiet, her thoughts solely on whether Henry is truly okay. Deep in the damp castle dungeon, 𝒂𝒗 is losing his mind. He screams at the bars, claiming he knows the secret of fate and ranting that 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is actually a demon. The guards dismiss him as a lunatic, mocking his desperate attempts to save his own neck. And the atmosphere shifts to ice as Henry Doubledore arrives. Clad in black, the young master commands the room with a terrifying new authority. He dismisses the guards, leaving him alone with his former tormentor. 𝒂𝒗, thinking he can still manipulate the boy, begs for mercy, promising to keep Henry's trauma a secret if he's released. Henry's voice is cold as he asks what 𝒂𝒗 plans to do once he's free. The old man's face twists with malice as he vows to take revenge on 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚. That was his final mistake. Henry's eyes glow with a lethal, piercing light. Mana explodes through the cell. 𝒂𝒗 is thrown back, coughing blood as blue electricity surges through his body. Henry stands before him, a master of his own power, his hand wreathed in ancient magic. 𝒂𝒗 is paralyzed with shock. He can't believe the boy he once broke is now looking him dead in the eye without a hint of fear. "They said I am not a defective product. Henry says, a serene, almost haunting smile on his face. He remembers 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's words, the first person to ever tell him he was enough exactly as he was. The internal chains are gone. He is no longer afraid, because now he has a sister worth protecting. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚. As 𝐤𝒂𝒧's screams echo through the stone walls, Henry walks away, leaving his past in the dirt. Back in her room, a peaceful 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 has no idea that her brother, a genius of blackmail and intimidation, has officially become her most devoted protector. The sun shines brightly over the Doubledore estate. But beneath the surface of this peaceful garden, the atmosphere is thick with concern. Little 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 enjoys a snack of fresh peaches, looking every bit the innocent child she's supposed to be. To the maids watching her, every bite she takes is a small victory in her recovery. However, the mood shifts as Linda and the other maids begin to whisper. They aren't just watching a child eat. They are looking for signs of deep-seated trauma. They worry that 𝐤𝒂𝒧's recent violence might have left scars on her young mind that won't easily heal. The thought of such a small child carrying such a heavy burden causes a flash of protective rage to ripple through the staff. They fear she might grow up unable to trust anyone, forever haunted by what she's endured. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, however, is far more resilient than they realize. Internally, she scoffs at the idea of trauma from such an event, having lived through much worse in her previous lives. But seeing the maids' eyes well up with tears, she realizes just how much they cherish her. To them, she is a kind, smart, and precious soul that must be shielded at all costs. Even the usually composed Rhea is moved by the girl's apparent bravery. But don't let Rhea's gentle smile fool you. When news of 𝐤𝒂𝒧's misdeeds first broke, the maid's reaction was anything but gentle. While the others were outraged, calling the man a beast, Rhea's fury went a step further. In a chilling display of loyalty, she had brandished a knife, ready to end the scoundrel herself. Her intensity was so great that even the other maids had to hold her back, reminding her to at least think about how to dispose of the evidence. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 can only watch in shock as the memory of Rhea's terrifyingly protective side flashes through her mind. But there's no time to dwell on the past. Rhea gently informs 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 that it's time for a formal meal with the master. The news hits 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 like a ton of bricks. The Duke has been in a foul mood lately, his expression more cold and terrifying than ever as he purges the council. The mere thought of sitting across from him has 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 wishing she had packed some digestive medicine. The dining hall is a masterclass in tension. The Duke sits at the head of the table, his presence casting a long, intimidating shadow over the meal. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 tries to eat, but every clink of silverware feels like a thunderclap in the oppressive silence. She's certain she's going to get indigestion before the first course is over. The tension breaks slightly when Isaac joins them, followed shortly by Henry. This is a pivotal moment. It's the first time 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 has seen Henry since his dark awakening in the dungeon. He had been cooped up in his room, banning even his closest attendants from entering. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 observes him closely, relieved to see that he seems to have physically recovered from the ordeal. Despite the family being together, the atmosphere remains suffocatingly quiet. Henry eats with a robotic precision, his eyes vacant. The Duke is equally silent, focused entirely on his meal. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 finds it jarring. In other noble households, meals are a time for lively conversation, but here it feels like a funeral. She worries that the 𝐤𝒂𝒧r incident has permanently damaged the already fragile bond between the Duke and his sons. Finally, Henry breaks the silence. He requests a leave of absence from the gifted center to continue his education at the estate. He knows the rumors regarding 𝐤𝒂𝒧r will be rampant, and he intends to manage the fallout from home. The Duke listens with a piercing gaze, weighing his son's words. With a brief, sharp "very well," he grants the request, and silence falls over the table once again. To 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, this doesn't feel like a family. It feels like a room full of strangers. She imagines the Duke as a strict, almost alien disciplinarian, far removed from the warmth she craves. She looks at the Duke, finding his cold demeanor impossible to read. But then, a flicker of something else appears. The Duke notices 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 eyeing the sweets on the table. In a rare, silent gesture of affection, he reaches out and places a strawberry on her plate. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is stunned by the small act of kindness. She notices Henry watching the exchange, his eyes lingering on the fruit. Realizing that Henry might feel left out, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 decides to take a massive risk. "Henry likes strawberries too," she shouts, her voice echoing through the silent hall. The Duke freezes, looking at her in confusion. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 doesn't back down, practically demanding that Henry be given one as well. To her shock, the Duke actually complies, placing a strawberry on Henry's plate. Henry stares down at the fruit, clearly caught off guard by the sudden inclusion. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 beams, her heart swelling with hope. This is what a family is supposed to be, small moments of connection that bridge the gaps between them. She imagines a future where the Duke and his sons can bicker and interact like a normal family. The Duke eventually breaks the moment, asking if they are finished, but the icy wall between them has finally developed a crack. As the meal ends, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is in high spirits, even playfully mentioning Isaac. She leaves the dining room with a bright smile, her joy infectious enough to make even the watching maids giggle. However, the warmth of the meal quickly fades as she wanders the quiet hallways alone. Because she was too nervous to eat properly, her stomach is already growling. But as she approaches a set of heavy doors, the air suddenly turns cold. A distorted, haunting voice whispers from the darkness, "Baby, my baby." 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 freezes, a primal sense of dread washing over her as she realizes something sinister is lurking within the estate. A suffocating, dark energy swirls around 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, identical to the chilling sensation she felt when touching the mysterious nude. The shadows seem to pulse, drawing her deeper into the manor's secrets. Following a ghostly whisper, she finds herself standing before a set of heavy, ornate doors. With a trembling breath, she steps into the gloom, guided by a voice that echoes from the darkness. High on the wall, a massive portrait of a stern, silver-haired man stares down at her. It's a regal image, but something feels off. The frame is ancient and weathered, a sharp contrast to the pristine luxury of the double-door estate. As 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 leans in, she realizes the voice isn't coming from the man in the painting, but from the massive, glowing amethyst embedded in the frame. The gem radiates a sinister, purple mist that seems to reach out for her. The sheer weight of the supernatural pressure is too much for her small body, and her vision begins to swim. Before she can scream for help, her consciousness slips away, and she collapses onto the cold floor. When the light finally returns to her eyes, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 finds herself tucked into her own bed. But the room is far from peaceful. The air is thick with tension as she hears the Duke's voice, cold and sharp as a blade, demanding answers from the terrified staff. He is beyond furious, his presence so overwhelming that 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 freezes, listening to him threaten the lives of the medical team if they can't explain her collapse. The lead doctor is on his knees, begging for mercy and insisting there is nothing physically wrong with the young lady. But the Duke isn't listening to excuses. He looks like a demon possessed, declaring that for every hour 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 remains unconscious, one person will be beheaded. Terrified by the thought of a massacre in her name, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 bolts upright with a panicked Henry and Isaac, who were hovering anxiously by her side, jump back in shock as their sister suddenly returns to the land of the living. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 stares at them, bewildered by how close they were standing. Her first priority is stopping the bloodshed, so she calls out to the Duke with a tiny, shaky voice. The Duke's murderous expression instantly softens into a look of profound relief as he sees her awake. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes she has to be careful. If she continues to collapse, the temple might use it as an excuse to reclaim her. She knows the Empress Dowager is just looking for a reason to make a move against the double doors. Despite the Duke and her brothers looking like a wall of terrifying protectors, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 focuses on the real victims here. The Duke's gaze remains heavy and unreadable as he watches her every move. Putting on her best innocent child act, she waves her arms and insists she's perfectly fine, hoping to save the doctor's necks. The medical staff burst into tears of pure joy, realizing they get to keep their heads today. They hail her as their sunshine, weeping with gratitude as 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 stands firm in her defense of them. The Duke and his sons watch this display of toddler diplomacy with silent, stoic expressions. Thanks to 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's passionate defense, the doctor purge is officially cancelled. The next morning, the sun shines through the window, but the drama is far from over. One of the doctors, Adam Moore, kneels solemnly, vowing to dedicate his entire life to the baby lady who saved him. He is moved to his core by her kindness. Meanwhile, another doctor sees with resentment toward the Duke's ruthless methods, promising never to forget the terror he was put through. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 observes the traumatized doctors and realizes that while she's safe for now, the mystery of the amethyst remains. She knows her collapse wasn't a normal illness. That purple gem is definitely cursed, or at least haunted by something powerful. She needs to figure out what it is, but there's a problem. She can't ask a priest for help. If the temple finds out she's cursed, they'll snatch her away under the guise of purifying her. Later, Leah enters the room to check on her, and 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 confirms she's feeling much better. Leah mentions that Henry and Isaac were the ones who carried her back to her room, which catches 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 completely off guard. Leah describes just how worried the two young lords were, highlighting their growing attachment to her. As Leah strokes her hair, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is stunned. She truly thought the brothers still hated her. A wave of relief washes over her as she realizes she's successfully built up some favor with the Doubledore family. However, her optimism is short-lived. She looks at the Duke and her brothers and remembers the dark future ahead. In her past lives, she was always abandoned when the real Child of Fate appeared. She knows that once the truth comes out that she's a fake, her current paradise will crumble. She's been discarded by father figures before and knows she is destined to be a sacrifice for an evil god. She fears that when the whole world calls for her death, even the Duke won't protect her. The image of her being sacrificed while the Duke watches haunts her. She decides she cannot rely on love or family. She needs a backup plan. Money is the only thing that won't betray her. She needs to build a massive slush fund for her eventual exile. She pulls out her secret treasure chest, a piggy bank shaped like a blue elephant. She carefully pours out her current savings, a small pouch of buttons. She's been collecting these precious gems from the staff, thinking she was making a fortune, but reality hits her hard. She can't live on buttons forever. It's time to start making real money. She looks at a calendar and remembers a crucial detail from the future. A high-profile, wanted criminal is about to sneak into Doubledore territory. This man has a massive bounty on his head from the Imperial Palace, because his face has never been seen. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 grins like a little villain. She's going to catch him and claim that reward. Suddenly, Leah appears behind her, startling the mastermind. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 jumps, nearly knocking over her button collection. She quickly hides her plans and pretends she was just studying her alphabet. Leah is impressed by her initiative and decides that if the baby lady wants to learn, she deserves the best education. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 screams internally, She's already lived 3 lives and mastered the language centuries ago. But Lee is already off to find a tutor, leaving 𝐿𝒂𝒚 to despair over her lost business time. She doesn't need a teacher. She needs a criminal to catch. Unfortunately, her plans for a bounty hunting career are put on hold as a top-tier master arrives to begin her lessons. Сцена пропущена через помилки генерації АПІ або провалу валідації. Welcome back to the world of Dumbledore, where the stakes are high, and the toddlers are even higher IQ. We're at the heart of the Empire, inside the imposing walls of Dubold Castle. Little 𝐿𝒂𝒚 isn't here for a nap. She's looking at the newcomers with a predatory glint in her eye. She's hunting for a criminal bounty to fund her eventual escape. But these candidates all look frustratingly normal. She tries to stay hidden, peeking from behind a pillar to scout her targets. But she isn't as stealthy as she thinks. A massive shadow looms over her, and she realizes she's been spotted by someone far more observant than her. The man is stunned to find a child wandering the halls, but the staff quickly corrects him. One of the men scoops her up with surprising care. This isn't just any staff member. He's a high-ranking official, and 𝐿𝒂𝒚 is the precious child of fate. While the other workers scramble to look busy under the watchful eyes of their superiors, 𝐿𝒂𝒚 flips the switch, putting on her most diligent student act to maintain her cover. The man is absolutely smitten, holding the baby lady like he's just won the lottery. But don't let the smiles fool you. Whispers fill the hall about this man Eugene North. He's a legendary genius who solved a national drought and joined the Imperial Intelligence Department at a record age. The staff regards him as a cold-blooded genius, a man of pure logic and zero emotion. 𝐿𝒂𝒚's imagination runs wild, picturing a literal monster of a man, but the reality is much more charming, though no less dangerous. The room is filled with other high-level candidates, like the fiery Charlie, 𝐿𝒂𝒚, and the stern and professional Syria, and the perpetually hungry Jacob. 𝐿𝒂𝒚 freezes as she hears them speak. She catches a specific lilt in their voices, a Noxton accent from the border region. This is the breakthrough she needed. The wanted criminal who murdered a high-ranking noble was known for that exact accent. She looks at the trio again, her mind racing. They are outsiders who arrived exactly when the criminal was supposed to go to ground, and they share that telltale accent. A small, devious smirk plays on her lips. The wanted murderer is definitely one of these 3. The crime was horrific. The victim was a noble so kind he spent his fortune on the poor and disabled. People even whispered the temple was involved, because he was doing more for the people than the church ever did. The entire empire is seeking justice for this man, but the killer has remained a ghost. 𝐿𝒂𝒚 wonders how the Duke managed to narrow it down to these candidates. However, even geniuses have their limits. Eugene and his associates look like they haven't slept since the last century, sporting dark circles that would make a zombie jealous. They discuss that matter with the Duke in hushed, exhausted tones. 𝐿𝒂𝒚's curiosity is piqued. What could be so important? Eugene tries to offer 𝐿𝒂𝒚 a toy, but he looks so terrifyingly sleep-deprived that it comes off more like a threat than a gift. Suddenly, the doors are kicked open. Henry and Isaac storm in, radiating protective big brother energy. They aren't happy about these commoners getting so much time with their sister. Eugene keeps his professional mask on, but the tension in the room is thick enough to cut with a sword. It's a silent war of intimidation between the young masters and the genius administrator. Sensing the mood, Eugene politely excuses himself, promising to continue 𝐿𝒂𝒚's lessons later. The brothers watch him leave like hawks guarding their nests. They've decided they can't wait any longer. Today is a special day. They lean in, their expressions softening as they focus entirely on 𝐿𝒂𝒚. And Isaac asks if she'd like to visit the shopping district. 𝐿𝒂𝒚 is confused by the sudden attention, especially when she notices the rest of the castle staff acting bizarrely. The maids are debating over toys, and even the guards are discussing the merits of wooden swords as gifts. It finally clicks. It's Children's Day. In her past lives, this day was a nightmare of being used as a prop by different dukes to show off their charity, while she sat alone in the dark. But this time it's different. The brothers are genuinely excited to take her out. 𝐿𝒂𝒚 resolves to play along and act happy when she inevitably receives some dolls or sweets. But when they arrive at their destination, it's not a toy shop. The building is crawling with armed guards and suspicious characters. Elegantly dressed nobles are being ushered inside with an air of secrecy. A host with a flamboyant mustache welcomes them with a gleeful shout. 𝐿𝒂𝒚 looks around, her confusion turning into genuine alarm. She asks Isaac where they actually are. With a bright, innocent smile, Isaac drops the bombshell. They aren't here for toys. They've brought her to a slave auction house. 𝐿𝒂𝒚 can only scream in her head, what kind of Children's Day gift is this? 𝐿𝒂𝒚 can hardly believe her ears, staring at her brothers in pure shock as they reveal their idea of a gift. Henry and Isaac, however, are beaming with pride, completely oblivious to her horror, as they promise to buy her anything her heart desires. They stand there with innocent, radiant smiles, ready to drop a fortune on a human life just to see her happy. The atmosphere shifts instantly as the auctioneer takes the stage, his voice booming through the hall. He grandly announces the start of the auction for heaven, a name that masks a dark reality. Below the stage, the clinking of heavy chains echoes as prisoners are marched out with bare, bruised feet. To 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, who has seen the worst of humanity across 4 lives, this place isn't heaven, it's a living hell. Despite the blatant illegality of slave auctions, the room is filled with noblewomen casually discussing the merchandise over tea. Wealthy aristocrats sit in the shadows, their indifference to the suffering before them chilling. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's blood boils. She looks at the crowd with a smile that hides a silent, burning wish for them all to rot. The first items are siblings from the 𝐿𝒂𝒃𝒚 tribe, their striking white hair and snow-white eyelashes marking them as rare collectibles. Henry leans in, clinically assessing them as if he's picking out a new doll for a shelf. He suggests buying the girl simply because she can read storybooks to 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, dismissing the boy as weak. Next, a massive beastman is dragged onto the stage, his body a map of scars and muscles, held down by heavy iron chains. Isaac's eyes light up, imagining the brute as a pack animal to give 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 shoulder rides around the castle. While Henry worries the creature might be too violent for their sister, Isaac turns to 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 with a gentle smile, asking her which toy she wants. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 trembles, her voice small as she tells them she hates this. When they ask why, she flatly states it's because the situation is pitiful. Isaac is genuinely confused, parroting the cold lessons of their predecessor. That being weak is the only true sin. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is fuming, realizing just how twisted their upbringing has been. She looks at the auctioneer, seeing him as a puppet master playing with lives, and wishes she could tear the whole system down. Suddenly, a guttural roar rips through the hall. The beastman has reached his breaking point. With a surge of monstrous strength, he shatters his restraints, the chains snapping like dry twigs. A massive shockwave blasts through the room, forcing 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 to shield her face as the crowd screams in terror. The auctioneer panics, screaming for the guards to catch the escapee. But the beastman is a blur of motion, his feet thundering against the wood. In one impossible leap, he clears the distance to the VIP balcony, landing right in front of 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚. The young girl freezes as the massive shadow looms over her. A giant hand reaches out, and for a terrifying second, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 thinks she's about to be snatched away. She shuts her eyes tight, braced for the worst, but then she notices something. The beastman isn't attacking, he's looking at her with a desperate intensity. Before he can move another inch, Henry steps in with chilling calm. He doesn't even draw a weapon. He simply activates a high-level magic circle. With a sickening thud, the beastman is slammed into the ground by invisible force, cratering the floorboards. As the dust settles, the brothers walk over the magic circles with total composure, looking down at the fallen warrior, as if he's a minor inconvenience. Isaac delivers a brutal kick to the beastman's head to ensure he stays down. Despite the beating, the beastman's spirit isn't broken, leading Isaac to conclude that his sturdiness makes him an even better toy for 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚. The auctioneer, seeing an opportunity, scurries over to praise the beastman's durability, desperate to close the sale. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is disgusted, her internal monologue screaming that she'd rather regress a 5th time than take part in this. But looking at the cold, murderous intensity in her brother's eyes, she realizes she can't just say no directly. She has to play the part of the innocent child. She puts on her best, pouting face, trembling slightly to trigger their protective instincts. It's a calculated move, her special method for handling the double-door med. She looks up at them with big, watery eyes, telling them she doesn't need any toys. "I like playing with Henry and Isaac better," she chirps, flashing a radiant, toothy smile. She doubles down on the flattery, calling them so cool, which immediately causes Henry to pause and reconsider. Isaac's resolve melts instantly. If 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 prefers them over a slave, then the choice is obvious. Mission accomplished. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 cheers internally as they agree to head back, her toddler acting saving her from a very awkward gif. As they walk away, her expression shifts to one of cold determination. The moment she gets home, she's reporting this illegal dump to the authorities. Henry looks back at her, still basking in the glow of her praise, asking just how much she likes playing with them. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 keeps the act up, giggling and cheering, while privately noting that flattery is a skill she could perform in her sleep. Meanwhile, outside the auction house 30 minutes prior, a carriage pulls up. Duke Doubledore steps out, accompanied by a weary Eugene. The Duke stares at the building known as Heaven, his expression unreadable as Eugene confirms that 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 and the boys are inside. The auction house stands as a monument to greed, a place where international law is ignored in favor of profit. Slavery may be illegal under imperial law, but the Duke knows the loophole. Prisoners of war are treated as property, a custom the nobility uses to line their pockets. It's a cycle of misery fueled by those who seek glory through conflict. Eugene reports that the young masters are likely trying to buy a gift for 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, but the Duke merely scoffs. To him, their efforts are pathetic compared to the superior gift he has planned. He approaches the entrance with his private guard, his presence commanding and terrifying. Inside, the brothers are still completely distracted by 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's charms, Henry even blushing slightly at her affection. Their peaceful moment is shattered when the Duke's men burst in, the guards outside left trembling in fear. The boys look up, their smiles fading as they realize their father has arrived to crash the party. The Duke doesn't care about the auction or the merchandise. He looks at the manager with eyes like ice. He doesn't want to browse. He wants to erase. With a terrifying aura radiating from his body, he gives a single, chilling command. "This damn place. Blow it up." As a massive surge of magical energy begins to tear through the structure, The Heaven auction house prepares to meet its violent end. The night sky bleeds red as the illegal auction house. Heaven is reduced to ash. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 watches the inferno with a cold, calculated gaze, noting that the den of sin is burning remarkably well. This isn't an accident. Duke Doubledore stands at the center of the chaos, surrounded by mages and glowing mana circles. With a single, chilling command, he orders his men to blow the entire facility to Kingdom Come. Panic erupts as the building groans under the weight of the flames. Run if you want to live. A voice screams through the smoke. Officials and noble guests who moments ago were bidding on lives are now scrambling for their own. Confusion and terror grip the crowd as their playground of cruelty collapses around them. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 looks on, stunned by the sheer scale of the destruction. She knew her father was ruthless, but completely leveling the place. That's a level of Doubledore efficiency she's still getting used to. Nearby, Henry and Isaac watch the spectacle with disturbing calm, Henry sporting a satisfied smirk. In an instant, a massive explosion rips through the structure. The grand hall is consumed by a pillar of fire, turning the opulent auction house into a graveyard of debris. Just like that, the Duke has wiped Heaven off the map. As the dust settles, a furious auction manager emerges from the wreckage, screaming about his merchandise and demanding to know if any slaves escaped. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 shoots him a look of pure, unadulterated disgust, thinking the man should have stayed inside while the building blew. Seeing her stare, Isaac completely misreads the situation. He thinks she's still eyeing the slaves and asks if she wants him to buy her one after all. He points toward a group of terrified captives huddled together, convinced he's finally found a gift his sister will like. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 realizes her brothers are still stuck in their might is right mindset. Isaac even boasts that she shouldn't worry about the slaves, because she clearly loves playing with her brothers more than anything. It's time for a change in tactics. If the carrot of acting cute won't work, she'll have to use the whip. She suddenly pulls away, telling Isaac she doesn't want to play with him anymore. She adds a stinging blow. "I don't think 𝐤𝐧𝐢 is cool." The words hit Isaac like a physical strike. He panics, desperately shouting that he is cool while Henry watches the drama with a sharp, observant eye. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 pivots to the moral high ground, her eyes welling with tears as she explains that being sold is a sad, pitiful thing. Isaac tries to argue back, citing the family's harsh philosophy that the weak are at fault for being devoured by the strong. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 turns his logic against him, asking if that means she's bad too since she's small and weak. The realization shatters the brothers' composure. They look at their tiny sister and finally see the vulnerability they've been ignoring. Isaac is haunted by the image of a young 𝐵𝒂𝒃, scared and alone. He realizes he wasn't trying to find a companion for her. He was just trying to buy her the best toy, because that's what nobles do. He's genuinely shaken. The Duke and Eugene watch the siblings from a distance, the family dynamic shifting in real time. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 sighs inwardly, realizing that raising her brothers is going to be a full-time job. Back at the Doubledore castle, the architectural grandeur serves as the backdrop for a new conflict. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 walks through the halls with her maid, Rhea, who warns her to be careful around new faces. But Lane isn't looking for safety. She's hunting for the wanted criminal Noxton, hoping they'll be foolish enough to approach her first. She overhears a heated argument nearby. Peeking through the greenery, she finds Syria, a dedicated administrator, confronting a man named Charlie Mayroll. Syria is calling him out for overcharging the family for saplings double the market price, suggesting he's embezzling funds. Charlie is dismissive and arrogant, sneering at Syria's concerns. He mocks her for bringing up commoner issues in a noble household. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 decides she's seen enough and steps out from her hiding spot. The sight of that little lady catches everyone off guard. Charlie is forced to introduce himself, but his tone remains condescending. When Rhea defends 𝐵𝒂𝒃, Charlie loses his temper, shouting at the mere maid for being rude to a castle official. He looms over them, his aura darkening with malice as he questions who they think they're talking to. Charlie threatens to drag Rhea before the disciplinary committee, an internal trial used to punish employees who disrupt the family order. He tells Rhea to get lost, his frustration boiling over as he prepares to brush past them. He even raises a hand as if to shove her aside. But before he can take another step, a small hand grips his sleeve. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 stands her ground, her eyes cold as she listens to him mutter about flattering a mere commoner. The phrase mere commoner triggers a flood of dark memories for 𝐵𝒂𝒃. In her past lives, she was discarded and mocked because of her lowly birth. She sees that same look of superiority in Charlie's eyes, the look of someone who believes she'll be kicked out the moment the truth is revealed. She tightens her grip on his clothes and demands a proper greeting before he leaves. Charlie scoffs, claiming he already greeted her when he arrived. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 doesn't back down, calling him a dummy, and insisting that a proper official greets their superior upon departure as well. Charlie's face reddens with rage, but before he can explode, 𝐵𝒂𝒃 delivers a sharp, painful kick right to his shin. She knows that if she lets this behavior slide once, it will only get worse. Men like Charlie will eventually try to crush her under their feet. She stands tall, confidently mentioning that Rhea told her anyone who doesn't greet her should have their heads cut off, and wonders aloud if she should report this to Lord North, also known as Eugene. The mention of Eugene's name sends a wave of terror through Charlie. He realizes the little lady has powerful backing and that his arrogance might cost him his life. He drops to his knees, trembling and begging for forgiveness. 𝐵𝒂𝒃 looks down at him with an icy glare, reminding him never to forget that she is a lady of Dumbledore. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 stands tall, her cold gaze piercing through the corrupt official Charlie Mayroll. He's completely paralyzed, realizing too late that the rumors of a helpless little girl were a total lie. Terrified for his life, Charlie doesn't stick around for a second more, bolting out of the room and nearly knocking over the staff in his desperate escape. The maids are left blinking in confusion, wondering what on earth could have sent a grown man running like a frightened rabbit. Syria is moved to tears by 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's hidden strength, giving her a silent thumbs up as the other maids look on in awe. Even though 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 isn't a Dumbledore by blood, the staff can't help but gossip about her commanding presence. She truly carries the aura of a high-ranking noble. While they gush over her, the administrator Jacob and Syria keep a watchful eye on the young lady, their expressions unreadable. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, however, is busy reflecting on her recent run of chaotic luck. From being trapped in a slave auction house to surviving a massive explosion, her life has been anything but peaceful. She remembers the sheer destruction the Duke unleashed to get her back, turning the entire auction house into a pile of rubble. But her mind is currently fixed on a bigger problem: a clever criminal who managed to take down a noble without leaving a trace. This isn't some low-level thug like Charlie. This mastermind is smart, elusive, and carries a massive 30,000 gold bounty on their head. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 narrows her eyes, already forming a theory on who the real culprit might be. As she ponders this, Syria offers her some tea, but 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's focus is on Jacob. The man is acting incredibly strange, even going so far as to measure her tiny foot, claiming he just really likes children. Syria interrupts the awkward moment, brightly reminding 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 that it's time to focus on her homework. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's sharp ears pick up on something suspicious: a mention of slaves and the price of garden trees. She realizes the clues are pointing toward a specific target. Later that night, she spots Jacob and Syria having a hushed, intense conversation in the garden. Jacob mentions he's hungry, but their body language suggests something far more serious than a late-night snack. Looking at their grim faces, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is convinced she's found the link she was looking for. A devious smile plays on her lips. She's ready to unmask the mastermind. The next day, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 joins Syria in the garden. Everything seems normal as Syria diligently works through a stack of documents. However, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 notices a fresh cut on Syria's hand and immediately voices her concern. Syria dismisses it with a smile, claiming she was just being clumsy. She insists she has medicine and that it's no big deal. The two administrators continue their professional duties, discussing the importance of staying healthy for their work. To anyone else, Syria seems like the definition of a kind, hardworking employee. Suddenly, Jacob appears behind 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 like a ghost, giving her a genuine fright. He suggests moving their session to the study, claiming the garden is too noisy, even though it's perfectly quiet. He seems overly eager to get a closer look at 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's work, and she can't help but find his behavior incredibly suspicious. She realizes he's hiding something. Then, a light bulb goes off. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 decides to use this to her advantage. Syria and Jacob are hesitant when she approaches them with a new request. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 turns on the ultimate charm, putting her fourth life experience to work. She begs them to be her personal teachers, knowing that keeping them close is the best way to gather evidence. After the lesson concludes, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 skips away, playing the part of a happy child. In reality, she's thrilled that they took the bait. By making them her teachers, she's created the perfect opportunity to catch the high-stakes criminal red-handed. Now, she just needs the Duke's official approval. She sprints through the castle hallways, eventually reaching the Duke's private office. She cautiously peeks through the door, seeing that he's currently busy in a meeting with his most trusted vassals. On the table sits a glittering holy relic, the second 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes the Duke's men managed to secure the powerful artifact from the swindler Turba much faster than she anticipated. The vassal Noz is in high spirits, laughing about how easily the matter was settled. The Duke, however, remains as stoic and formidable as ever, casually mentioning that he sent the head of a king to the emperor as a gift. Noz gives all the credit to 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, noting that they never would have found the 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 if she hadn't exposed the scam. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 can't help but giggle, imagining the look on their rival Duke Valois's face. She finally steps into the room, waving a cheerful greeting to the group. She runs toward the Duke, expecting his usual warm welcome. But as she approaches, she stops in her tracks. Something is wrong. Instead of picking her up, the Duke just stares down at her with an icy, piercing gaze. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 breaks out in a cold sweat. The intensity in his eyes feels strangely familiar, like a partner who just found out they've been replaced. It's a look of pure, possessive betrayal, and 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes she might have some explaining to do about her new teachers. The Duke of Dumbledore isn't easily swayed, and as 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 approaches him with a request to start her lessons, his icy gaze demands an explanation. She puts on her best innocent child act, claiming she wants to be a hard-working student, just like Henry and Isaac. The Duke warns her that serious study means less playtime with her brothers. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 doesn't miss a beat, telling him that's perfectly fine. This sends a shockwave through the Duke. Usually, she can't stand to be away from them for a second, and his jealousy begins to flare as he questions if they're no longer her favorites. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 freezes, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. She realizes she's made a massive tactical error. She remembers how much she's played up her love for the boys, and if she doesn't fix this now, the Duke's wounded pride might ruin everything. Desperate to course correct, she knows she has to pull out the big guns. She shouts a denial, claiming that while she likes Henry and Isaac the most in the world, she loves 𝐤𝐸𝐾 the most in the entire universe. The effect is instantaneous. The Duke's cold exterior melts to a faint, satisfied smirk. He scoops her up, his ego fully restored, and asks who could have possibly taught her such sweet words. Behind them, the Duke's vassals are crumbling under the weight of pure envy. They wail in despair, wishing they had a daughter who expressed her love so boldly. The Duke basks in the glory of being the favorite, looking down at the crying men with a look of supreme victory. While the lords weep over their own lack of cute daughters, the Duke feels like the most powerful man alive. He hugs 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 close, convinced she's been drawn only to him from the very beginning. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 wipes a bead of sweat from her forehead, relieved that her flattery worked to perfection. With the Duke in a generous mood, he agrees to the teachers. He offers to let his top vassal, North, handle it, but 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 has a specific target in mind. She complains that North is too busy with boring documents. Instead, she suggests the new preliminary administrators she met in the greenhouse, 𝐤𝐸𝐴 and Jacob. The plan is set. 𝐤𝐸𝐴 arrives with a bright, professional smile, promising to do her absolute best to teach the baby lady. The curriculum is split. Jacob and a man named Charlie will handle language, while 𝐤𝐸𝐴 focuses on history. 𝐤𝐸𝐴 is bubbling with enthusiasm, ready to take 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 on a tour of the castle's rich past. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 plays the part of the excited pupil, but her eyes are sharp. The investigation has officially begun. The language lessons start as a disaster. Charlie is an insufferable narcissist, more interested in bragging about his own genius than teaching a 4-year-old. He flexes and poses, claiming it's charity work to teach someone so young. His ego is his downfall. He's promptly dragged away by North for his unprofessional behavior. Meanwhile, Jacob is the opposite. He's cold and distant, showing zero interest in the lesson itself. He watches 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 with a suspicious, calculating gaze that feels entirely out of place for a teacher. Even the maids notice his unsettling focus, whispering that the way he looks at the baby lady is deeply concerning. However, they dismiss it as being overly sensitive, unaware of the danger lurking in the room. Later, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 heads out for her history lesson with 𝐤𝐸𝐴. As they walk through the gardens, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 skips ahead, maintaining her bubbly facade. 𝐤𝐸𝐴 explains that they are heading toward a historically significant tower, her demeanor calm and nurturing. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 observes her closely, noting that 𝐤𝐸𝐴 is incredibly skilled at handling children, almost too skilled. Suddenly, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's foot catches on a stone. She tumbles to the ground with a loud thud. The maids rush to her side, panicking as they see her knees have turned red. 𝐤𝐸𝐴 leans in, checking on her with a worried expression. But as 𝐤𝐸𝐴 gets close, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's eyes lock onto something, a dark, ugly stain on 𝐤𝐸𝐴's pink shoe. 𝐤𝐸𝐴 notices her staring and quickly tries to hide it, claiming it looks hideous. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 just beams a bright smile, telling her it's okay, masking the fact that she just found exactly what she was looking for. They continue to the tower, a structure built 3 centuries ago to honor the Duke's ancestors. When 𝐤𝐸𝐴 asks if she'd like to go up, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 cheers with feigned excitement. She races up the stone steps, leaving the maids behind. Inside the quiet, shadowed stairwell, 𝐤𝐸𝐴 mentions that 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 reminds her of her own younger siblings. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 looks back, her voice sweet as she remarks that 𝐤𝐸𝐴 must have been a wonderful older sister. 𝐤𝐸𝐴's expression darkens as she admits she wasn't. The atmosphere shifts instantly. The innocent child disappears, replaced by the cold gaze of a regressor. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 stops and tells her she's wrong. She was a great sister. So great, in fact, that she was willing to kill a noble for them. 𝐤𝐸𝐴's face pales, her composure shattering as her dark secret is dragged into the light. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 points to the show the stain isn't dirt. It's blood evidence from the crime. The trap has snapped shut. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 stares her down with a chilling smirk. Check and mate. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's confrontation with 𝐤𝐸𝐴 takes a dark turn as she reveals the chilling truth behind the teacher's past. Looking at the mark on 𝐤𝐸𝐴's foot, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes it's the brand of a slave, a secret 𝐤𝐸𝐴 tried to erase by burning her own flesh. To hide her identity, she even went as far as to scar herself with fire. 𝐤𝐸𝐴 stands frozen, her composure shattering as her history as a former slave is laid bare. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 connects the dots, realizing that the noble 𝐤𝐸𝐴 murdered wasn't an innocent man, but a notorious slave trader. 𝐤𝐸𝐴 wasn't just an assassin, she was that noble's property. This inside knowledge of the mansion's layout is exactly how she managed to strike him down and escape undetected. As the wind whistles through the tower, 𝐤𝐸𝐴 finally drops the act, admitting she knew her past would catch up to her, though she didn't expect a child to be the one to unmask her. With a cold, sharp gaze, she justifies her actions. That man deserved 1,000 deaths. In a haunting flashback, we see the horrors 𝐤𝐸𝐴 witnessed. While other children waited to be saved, she was forced to work in the mansion because of her intelligence. She saw the true, monstrous nature of the man long before anyone else did. 𝐤𝐸𝐴's only goal was to save the other children, but by the time she escaped, many had already been sold into the darkness. Even now, the memory of those lost children causes her to grip her arm in a fit of silent, agonizing rage. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 watches, realizing 𝐤𝐸𝐴's motive for joining the Duke wasn't malice, but desperation. 𝐤𝐸𝐴 reveals she risked everything to enter Dumbledore because she heard a terrifying rumor. A subordinate of the slave trader was planning to infiltrate the estate. She had intended to beg the Duke for help, knowing that if she were caught, her life would be over. She shouts that she needs to find her younger siblings, and that the man's associate is already among them. The realization hits 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 like a physical blow. She recalls Jacob's behavior during their lessons, his creepy, clinical way of measuring her body at a glance. He wasn't teaching, he was assessing his merchandise. A wave of pure terror washes over 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 as she realizes the predator is already inside the house. She trembles, the horror of the situation finally sinking in. Suddenly, a shadow looms over them. Jacob has found them in the tower. His polite facade is gone, replaced by a murderous intensity as he demands to know how 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 figured him out. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 and Syria are cornered. Before Syria can even react, Jacob moves with professional, lethal speed. He lunges forward, his eyes filled with a terrifying cold light. He catches Syria by the throat, his grip tightening instantly. Syria gasps for air, completely overpowered by the man's brutal strength. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 stands frozen in shock. She realized she made a fatal mistake. This tower is isolated and far from the main castle, meaning no guards are coming to save them. It's a place where no one can hear them scream. She thought Syria was the only threat, never imagining a professional kidnapper was lurking in the shadows. Jacob tosses Syria aside like a rag doll. He towers over 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, his presence suffocating. As he approaches, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes the gravity of her situation. If she's captured and drugged now, there is no escape. She ducks away, her mind racing for a solution. Panic sets in as she wonders if she'll be forced to use her ultimate trump card, regression. She looks toward the tower window, weighing her desperate options. She has to believe in her power. Jacob sneers, mentioning his client wanted her delivered unbroken. But since she's been so difficult, he's willing to take a pay cut just to subdue her. He reaches out, his massive hand closing in on the terrified girl. Just then, the door bursts open. The maids, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 and her companion, charge into the room. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 screams for them to run, knowing two maids are no match for a professional assassin like Jacob. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃 isn't running. She lowers her head, a dark aura radiating from her. In a flash of blinding movement, she strikes. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 moves with the grace of a master combatant, her dress fluttering as she closes the distance. She lands a precision blow that catches Jacob completely off guard. With a fluid, technical motion, she flips him through the air. She transitions into a brutal grappling maneuver, locking his arm and throat with expert efficiency. The gentle maid slams the assassin into the floor with enough force to crack the stone. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 can only stare in utter confusion. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 stands up calmly, smoothing her apron and apologizing for her mistake, claiming she's just a bit out of practice. Jacob lies unconscious and defeated at her feet. The other maid, Dahlia, looms over the fallen assassin with a terrifying expression, listing off various criminal syndicates and asking if he's one of their rats. She begins a technical interrogation, delivering a series of heavy blows to ensure Jacob won't be waking up anytime soon. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is left speechless, her jaw hitting the floor. She stammers, asking who these women really are. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 smiles innocently, insisting she's just a maid who spent some time elsewhere in the past. When pressed, she reveals she was part of a group called 𝐤𝐢𝐬𝒃. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's eyes widen. 𝐤𝐢𝐬𝒃 is the legendary group of magic knights who use aura, the elite of the elite, who once ended a war of 100,000 troops in mere days. This unassuming maid is a war hero from the Duke's most prestigious knight order. Dahlia chimes in, waving off the shock. Before coming to the castle, she says she just ran a small financial business. As she stands there covered in the assassin's blood with a cheerful smile, she clarifies that her business was actually high-stakes loan sharking. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes the terrifying truth. Everyone the Duke hires is a high-level criminal or a legendary warrior. Dahlia even pouts, mentioning that among the maids, she actually has the lowest bounty on her head. The maids burst into tears, dramatically apologizing to 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 for being criminals, while 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes that in the Doubledore estate, status and background mean nothing, only power matters. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 finds herself swarmed by her doting maids, their affection as overwhelming as the recent chaos. But the warmth is interrupted when Syria enters, her professional mask firmly in place as she delivers a summons. The master is waiting. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 makes her way down the grand hall, a tiny figure walking toward a heavy atmosphere of judgment. Inside the drawing room, the opulence of the Doubledore estate feels suffocatingly cold. Duke Doubledore sits enthroned, his gaze sharp enough to cut glass as he surveys the wreckage of the day. Beside him, Henry and Isaac stand like twin sentinels of ice, their patience long since evaporated. On the floor lies the broken form of Jacob, the slave trader, while the household staff stands ready for the fallout. The Duke leans in, his voice low and dangerous. He asks 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 if she's been hurt. Despite the terror of the ordeal, his eyes betray a sliver of genuine concern for his ward. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 quickly puts on her bravest face, insisting she's perfectly fine. There's a tense silence as the Duke searches her eyes for the truth. But when 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 admits her head hurts just a little bit, the room's temperature drops to sub-zero. Isaac doesn't hesitate. He delivers a brutal kick to the incapacitated Jacob, his rage boiling over at the thought of the girl being touched. Jacob can only let out a muffled groan of agony. With a single word, the Duke commands silence, his presence filling the room with an invisible, crushing weight. The administrative officials are sweating bullets, knowing someone's head has to roll for this security breach. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒊𝒔𝒈, desperate to save his own skin, steps forward with a theatrical display of fake grief. He points a trembling finger, demanding that Eugene North be beheaded for allowing such a subversive element into the castle. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 watches the spectacle, her sharp mind seeing right through the charade. North didn't even participate in the selection process this time. He's being framed. She knows North's reputation. A brilliant, rising star with no family backing, making him the perfect sacrificial lamb for the corrupt officials. North stands silent, his head bowed in a resignation that breaks Leblane's heart. The Duke's judgment is swift. He orders the disciplinary committee to handle the others, but his gaze turns to North. His eyes glow with a lethal intensity as he delivers the sentence. Cut off his wrists. North drops to his knees, the weight of a shattered future crashing down on him. The other administrators can barely hide their relief, glad to have escaped the Duke's wrath at the expense of a talented rival. Leblane knows she can't let this happen. North is too valuable an asset for her future. As North prepares to accept his fate, Leblane triggers her ultimate weapon. She bursts into a loud, heart-wrenching wail. Henry and Isaac scramble to her side, their cold exteriors crumbling as they frantically try to find out who made her cry. Leblane sobs that the Duke is being scary, playing the role of a terrified child to perfection. Isaac tries to soothe her, admitting that everyone is scared of the Duke, but his focus is entirely on her distress. He is completely paralyzed by her tears. Leblane continues her performance, her small frame shaking with calculated sobs. The Duke looks over, his stern resolve finally snapping at the sight of her tears. He stands and lifts the small girl into his arms, his movements surprisingly gentle. He whispers her name, trying to offer comfort. Between hiccups, Leblane begs him not to hurt North, her voice trembling with feigned innocence. She clings to him, pleading for the administrator's forgiveness. The Duke remains silent for a long moment, the tension in the room thick enough to choke on. Finally, he concedes, telling her to stop crying and granting her request. The administrators stand in stunned silence. The Duke of Dumbledore has actually changed his mind. Internally, Leblane's tears vanish instantly. The plan worked perfectly. She looks at North, an incredible talent that even the Imperial family covets. A dark, knowing smile plays in her mind. She has just secured his absolute loyalty. As he is led away, Leblane marks him as her own. Later, in the quiet of an office, Henry and Isaac reflect on the day's events. Henry wonders what would have happened if Leblane had truly been taken. Isaac stops his work, the thought of his sister suffering a fate like the slaves they've seen haunting him. He envisions a version of Leblane in chains, cold and broken. The image is enough to ignite a cold, focused fury in his eyes. Isaac stands up, his resolve hardened. He asks if Heaven, the vigilante organization, is being rebuilt. Henry questions his brother's sudden interest in the slave trade. Isaac snaps that he will never let such a threat exist near his family again. Henry hands him a document, instructing him to deliver it to North. Isaac scans the page, confused by the cryptic contents. Henry offers a chilling, confident smile. By this evening, the one known as Half-Mask will be nothing more than a memory. Watch your mouth, Henry snaps, his voice cold as Isaac continues to tease him. Even in a moment of sibling banter, the intensity of the Dumbledore household is never far from the surface. As night falls over the grand and silent Dumbledore estate, the air is thick with anticipation. Inside, Leblane stirs from her sleep, her eyes fluttering open as she's greeted by a familiar presence. Her maids, Rhea and Dahlia, are already there, beaming with excitement. "The master is looking for you," they chirp, pulling her from her bed. Still groggy, Leblane rubs her eyes, wondering if the investigation into the mysterious figure who sent Jacob has already yielded results. She is led through the lavish, dimly lit hallways of the mansion. With every step, the anticipation builds as she follows the maid toward the dining hall. Suddenly, a delicious scent hits her. "I smell something incredible," she thinks, her curiosity finally overriding her sleepiness. She pushes the heavy doors open and stops dead in her tracks. The room is a sea of flowers and gold. "Leb," her brothers shout in unison. Isaac and Henry are practically vibrating with energy, each holding a massive, beautifully wrapped gift box. Then it clicks. Today is Children's Day. Between the slave rings and the political maneuvering, Leblane had completely forgotten. She reaches for the first gift, a large blue box, and carefully clicks it open. Inside lies a bow of breathtaking craftsmanship. Leblane's eyes widen as a memory from her second life flashes before her. She remembers an excited girl begging for this exact bow from Eslo, only to be met with a harsh reality. The price tag was a staggering 10 billion, a promotional item meant to showcase a master's skill, never intended for actual sale. And yet, her brothers have somehow tracked it down and bought it just for her. Not to be outdone, Isaac shoves his gift forward, desperate for his turn. Leblane opens the second box, her heart racing. Inside is a dress so flashy and intricate it seems to glow under the chandelier light. This time, a memory from her first life resurfaces. She recalls a young girl pointing at this very dress, her eyes full of longing. But the price was another mountain of nines, nearly 10 billion once again. The girl's father had laughed it off, explaining it was a designer showpiece, a literal, unbuyable object. Leblane stands in stunned silence, realizing the sheer scale of the wealth and effort her brothers have poured into these gifts. Henry looks at her with pure, protective affection. "Please don't fly away, my little angel," he whispers. She smiles, feeling the overwhelming warmth of their love, even if their taste in gifts is a bit extreme. She throws her arms around both of them, truly grateful for the family she's finally found. But the celebration isn't over. A gloved hand reaches into the frame, holding a simple, heavy yellow envelope. She looks up to find Duke Dumbledore himself standing there, his expression unreadable. "Open it," he commands. The brothers watch with bated breath, wondering what their father could have possibly done to top their legendary treasures. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 slowly slides the document out. The paper feels thick, official, and ancient. As she reads the first few lines, her face goes pale. "I think I just saw something terrifying," she mutters to herself. She steals a glance at the Duke. He stands tall, arms crossed, radiating a smug, victorious aura that says he's already won the competition. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's heart hammers against her ribs. It's the deed to the largest toy store in the entire empire. The Duke leans down, his voice smooth and satisfied. "I'll read it for you, since you're still young." The maid jumps in, explaining that this isn't just a store, it's a prime location in the heart of the capital, with exclusive contracts to every luxury brand in existence. Henry and Isaac are fuming in the background, realizing they're unbuyable. Gifts have been completely overshadowed by their father's sheer power move. The Duke doesn't even try to hide his triumph. He is the undisputed winner of Children's Day. He looks down at his sons with a cold, mocking gaze, enjoying every second of their defeat. The maid continues to gush, telling 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 that with this paper, she owns every single toy in the building. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 knows the burden of such a gift. She puts on her best childish pout and turns away. "Me no likey. Me like just toys better." Inside, she's screaming with joy. She loves it. But as a regressor playing a dangerous game, she knows that owning something this massive only draws a target on her back. Plus, she can't exactly pack a whole store in her bag when she eventually has to flee. She plays the part of the innocent toddler perfectly, fidgeting with her fingers. "𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, you know what dad is. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 just like toys." The Duke watches her walk away, his pride instantly deflated. He clenches his glove, a dark, terrifying aura swirling around him. "Bring me the list of those fools who said a deed would be perfect," he growls. He regrets listening to his advisors, thinking he should have followed his gut and just built her a literal castle made of toys. Outside, the sound of his advisors wailing in terror echoes through the night as they realize their perfect suggestion has backfired. As the moon hangs high over the double-door prison, heavy, rhythmic footsteps echo through the cold stone corridors. A woman sits behind the iron bars, her face a mask of hollow defeat. A small shadow stretches across the cell floor, cutting through the darkness. The prisoner looks up, startled by the late-night visitor. She adjusts her glasses, squinting to see who has come to see her. There stands 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, her blue eyes glowing with a chilling, calculated intensity. "I've got a place to go with you," she declares, ready to move the next piece on her chessboard. As 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 and Syria descend into the damp darkness of the dungeon, Syria's breath hitches. Realizing where they are, she asks if this is truly the place. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 offers a chillingly calm smile, confirming her suspicions. "This is the high-security ward where the slave trader Jacob is currently rotting behind heavy, iron-wrought gates." 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 knows the stakes. Jacob was tight-lipped about his mysterious guest, until the very end. She surmises that the Duke intentionally left the dungeon's security porous, hoping Jacob would either flee and lead them to his employer or be silenced by the guests themselves. Either way, it would flush the enemy out into the light. Fortunately for 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, this lack of guards makes it incredibly easy for her to slip through the shadows unnoticed. With a heavy groan of metal, the door creaks open, revealing the nightmare within. Inside, they find Jacob, a pathetic, bloodied mess of a man cowering against the stone walls. The sight of him sends Syria into a state of visible, trembling shock. Her composure snaps instantly as she lunges forward, seizing him by the collar and demanding he answer her. She screams, desperate to know where he sold her siblings from the House of Hope. Jacob merely groans as he's slammed back against the wall, the impact spraying fresh blood across the floor. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 watches the interrogation with cold, calculating eyes. Syria demands the identity of the guest, who ordered 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's kidnapping, refusing to believe he doesn't know. Her face is a mask of pure, unadulterated fury as Jacob persists with his lies. Jacob's chin trembles as he prepares to speak, but his words are poison. He mocks her, claiming a slaughterhouse only provides meat and never questions the customer's background. He doesn't get another word out before 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's foot connects squarely with his jaw in a devastating kick. The tiny girl is absolutely fuming, refusing to let him spout such arrogance in her presence. Syria can only stare in stunned silence, watching the 4-year-old completely take charge of the situation. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's eyes glow with a terrifying, predatory blue light. She doesn't stop at one hit, pummeling the man with a flurry of strikes that leave him reeling. Despite her small stature, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is a whirlwind of violence, leaving Jacob wheezing on the floor. Even Syria is taken aback, watching as the girl she thought was a helpless child acts like a relentless force of nature. Finally, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 stops, telling Syria that talking to this coward is a waste of time since he's clearly too terrified to speak the truth. Stepping over the broken man, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 turns her focus to Syria, stating she has a vital question. She looks Syria dead in the eye, asking just how far she is willing to go to find her siblings. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's aura turns oppressive as she asks if Syria is truly prepared to shed blood and kill those who trampled on her life. Syria realizes in this moment that 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is no ordinary child. She is something far more formidable. Without hesitation, Syria reaches out and firmly clasps 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's hand, sealing a silent pact. She declares her mind was made up the moment she took a life to survive, asking simply what needs to be done. 𝐤𝐳𝐬𝐿's gaze hardens with a new, professional resolve. Suddenly, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 flips the switch back to her innocent child persona, chirping that 𝐤𝐳𝐬 should start by collecting her own bounty. 𝐤𝐳𝐬 is floored, wondering if she's being scammed or led into a trap by turning herself into the police. She panics, fearing certain execution, but 𝐤𝒂𝒃's smile remains confident as she promises 𝐤𝐳𝐬 that she will not die. The young regressor has already calculated every move on the board. She instructs 𝐤𝐳𝐬 that before a prisoner faces the end, they are allowed to speak with a priest. At that moment, 𝐤𝐳𝐬 must claim she knows the location of the original Bible. 𝐤𝐳𝐬 is skeptical, knowing she has no such knowledge, but 𝐤𝒂𝒃 insists that she knows exactly where it is. 𝐤𝐳𝐬 is humbled, asking why 𝐤𝒂𝒃 would waste such a priceless, legendary treasure on someone like her. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 gives her a heartwarming smile, telling her she is worth it, which brings 𝐤𝐳𝐬 to the verge of tears. Internally, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 acknowledges 𝐤𝐳𝐬's true value. She is a brilliant administrator who risked everything for her found family, making her the perfect ally to operate in the shadows. 𝐤𝐳𝐬 focuses, asking for the location of the holy relic. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 reveals the bombshell. It's hidden within the 𝐵𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈r's secret library. It's a masterstroke. The Bible should belong to the temple, but the Empress kept it for herself. By leaking this, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 will watch the 𝐵𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒈r sip her tea in ignorance while her world crumbles. The moment the temple finds out, their relationship with the crown will shatter completely. As the plan is set, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 tells 𝐤𝐳𝐬 she must leave before the sun rises. 𝐤𝐳𝐬 kneels in gratitude, swearing she will never forget this kindness. But she asks for one final favor. Her eyes narrow behind her glasses, a dark intent flickering within. She requests that 𝐤𝒂𝒃 leave the cell first and not return, no matter what sounds she hears coming from inside. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 understands perfectly and agrees, her expression unreadable. She steps out into the hallway, the heavy door groaning as it shuts behind her. A split second later, a blood-curdling scream of agony echoes through the stone corridor, and 𝐤𝒂𝒃 winces, covering her ears. By the time the sun rises, Jacob is hauled out of the prison as a corpse, and 𝐤𝐳𝐬 has vanished into the morning mist. A few days later, a mysterious Children's Day gift arrives for 𝐤𝒂𝒃. It's a massive sum of 30,000 francs, the exact amount of 𝐤𝐳𝐬's bounty, delivered right to her door. Under the roots of a newly planted sapling, a secret treasure lies waiting, a heavy pouch of gold coins, the first fruits of 𝐤𝒂𝒃's alliance with 𝐤𝐳𝐬. Seeing the delivery, the tiny mastermind can't help but giggle. 𝐤𝐳𝐬 is proving to be a delightfully wicked accomplice. While most would see this as a modest escape fund, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 has much darker plans for the currency. With a predatory glint in her eyes, she vows to make this small pile of gold snowball into a mountain of wealth. Her ultimate goal: to amass enough power to live a life of absolute luxury once she eventually exiles herself from the political stage. But her plotting is cut short when a maid arrives with an urgent summons. 𝐤𝒂𝒃's eyes go wide as she realizes the location: the Grand Conference Hall, the nerve center where the Empire's most powerful officials are currently gathered. She cautiously makes her way through the opulent corridors, her mind racing with possibilities. Fear grips her. Did the Duke find out she was the one who let 𝐤𝐳𝐬 escape from the dungeon? As the massive doors creak open, she is met with a sight of overwhelming grandeur. Rows of top-tier power players sit at the long table, their expressions cold and calculating. At the head of the room sits the Duke of 𝐤𝒂𝒃, looking every bit the sovereign ruler. To the absolute shock of every man in the room, the Duke lifts 𝐤𝒂𝒃 and settles her firmly onto his lap. The officials are visibly shaken, sweating as they realize the rumors of the Duke's favoritism weren't just talk, they were an understatement. 𝐤𝒂𝒃, however, is paralyzed with dread, wondering if this public display is a prelude to her adoption being annulled. Instead, the Duke's voice rings out with authority as he introduces her: 𝐤𝒂𝒃. The room falls into a stunned silence as 𝐤𝒂𝒃 realizes the weight of that middle name. A high-ranking official slams his hands onto the table in protest, his face contorted in disbelief. It turns out, 𝐤𝒃 was the name of the late Duchess, and the Duke is effectively elevating a child of fate to the highest ball status. In this world, a middle name isn't just a label. It's a sacred link to a distinguished ancestor or parent. It is a privilege reserved strictly for biological heirs who will inherit the family legacy. By bestowing this name, the Duke isn't just being kind, he is making a legal declaration of her lineage. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 realizes with a start that she now has the same rights as a biological child, including the authority to lead the House of 𝐤𝒂𝒃 in the Duke's absence. Even the vassals who usually support her are frozen in terror at the political implications. One official begs the Duke to reconsider, arguing that the temple will surely use this power to manipulate the entire family. 𝐤𝒂𝒃's quiet life is officially over. She's been thrust into the center of a hurricane. She knows she needs to be strong, but this level of attention is a double-edged sword. It's simply too much too soon. She can feel the predatory eyes of every faction in the room locking onto her like targets. Seeing his daughter's distress, the Duke's aura turns murderous as he demands to know who dares to frighten her. The protesting official cowers, his bravado instantly evaporating under the Duke's icy stare. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 panics internally, wondering if she played her role a little too well and seduced the Duke into being overprotective. She resorts to her best defense, bursting into tactical tears to break the tension. Later, the Duke's gaze remains sharp. He acted hastily on purpose, knowing that putting a spotlight on 𝐤𝒂𝒃 would force her enemies to move into the light. His advisors analyze the situation with Jacob, unsure if the kidnapping attempt was an inside job or from an external rival. If it was an outsider, they were clearly targeting the prestige of the Dubald name. The Duke stands tall, knowing that if the child of fate were harmed, the backlash would be catastrophic for the temple and the crown alike. The advisors suggest forming an elite guard to protect the girl. They remember the tragedy of the late Duchess Rsette, who was a minor noble with no family to protect her. The Duke's expression remains unreadable as he thinks back to that time. He had kept Rsette completely hidden, locked away behind layers of security and secrecy to keep her safe. She was a ghost in the capital, rarely seen even at her own estate. Despite the impeccable security that rivaled the imperial families, it wasn't enough. The memory of her death still haunts the halls of the Dubald Manor. The Duke realizes that hiding his loved ones didn't work before. By drawing all eyes to 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, he's gambling that the public scrutiny will keep even the most daring insiders in check. His advisor notes that while the knights were punished for Syria's escape, the Duke's reaction was surprisingly measured. Despite increasing their training fivefold, the Duke didn't seem truly angry. The advisor smiles, realizing the Duke knew all along that 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 was the one who opened the dungeon doors. Instead of being furious, the Duke is secretly impressed by her athleticism and cunning. Reports from the shadows described her moving through the dungeon with the speed and precision of someone who had memorized a map. But while the Duke is proud, the Senate is in an uproar. The officials are outraged, claiming the late Duke would rise from his grave if he knew a commoner-born adoptee was given the Duchess's name. They fear she will be named successor over the young masters. The dissenters argue that as the only daughter, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 will eventually manage the house's internal affairs, massive funds, and sacred rituals. Desperate to block her ascent, one official suggests a new plan, creating another qualified daughter to rival her. They turn their attention to Baron Wilston, a branch of the Dubald house, inquiring about the age of his daughter. The Baron looks nervous as the political sharks begin to circle, looking for a way to replace the child of fate with a blood relative of their own. Life as the newly named Rsette isn't all glitz and glamour. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 finds herself ducking through the garden shrubbery, just to escape the suffocating attention of her new attendants. It's exhausting. Every move she makes is now scrutinized by a household that suddenly cares way too much. Just an hour ago, the West Wing's elite staff descended upon her. Led by the head maid, these specialized servants are eager to push aside 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's original caretakers to claim the honor of serving the official here. The takeover is aggressive. The West Wing head maid immediately begins picking apart the East Wing's maintenance, scoffing at a carpet she deems far too worn for a lady of Rsette's status. She treats the current staff with blatant disrespect, acting as if the previous care provided was beneath the family's dignity. Rhea can barely contain her fury at the insult, but the political reality is cold. Previously, these elite servants ignored 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 entirely. But the name Rsette has changed everything. The head maid's smile is razor-sharp as she implies that 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's loyal original attendants could be replaced at a moment's notice if the little lady desires better service. They try to buy her affection with promises of endless toys and organic snacks, desperate to lure her to the West Wing. To 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, it's nothing more than a headache. Escaping the vultures, she retreats to the grass, focused on a much more important mission, picking a bouquet of wildflowers to cheer up her beloved Rhea. But her peaceful moment is shattered when she accidentally crawls right into someone's path. A blonde girl in a frilly dress tumbles to the ground with a dramatic cry. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's first instinct's to help, but she's met with a face full of arrogance. The stranger doesn't want help. She wants an apology, demanding 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 bow to her immediately. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 isn't one to be bullied. She calmly suggests they both apologize since neither was looking where they were going. This sends the girl into a tailspin of outrage. She sneers at 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, asking if this brat has any clue who she is. The girl looks ready to snap, her eyes wide with disbelief that a common-looking child would dare talk back. The tension is broken by Henry's arrival. The blonde girl's personality flips instantly, her rage replaced by a sugary sweet smile as she greets the young master. Henry, however, isn't buying the act. He stares her down with a cold, piercing question, "Who are you?" The girl's eyes flicker with a momentary flash of calculation. She introduces herself as Cattleya Wilston, a second cousin from a branch family. She immediately takes a jab at 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, forgiving her for the collision, because she was dressed so simply that Cattleya didn't recognize her as the little lady. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 looks down at her dirt-smudged clothes, realizing she looks nothing like a duchess in training. She remembers how protective her brothers are. If they saw her like this, heads would roll. Isaac and Henry take the family prestige very seriously, often threatening extreme measures against anyone who dares disrespect their sister. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 gulps, knowing the storm that's brewing. Cattleya drops a bombshell. She's moving in. She offers a hand in a mock gesture of friendship, but Henry's face turns pale with shock. Later, as Henry distractedly feeds 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 strawberries, his mind is racing. He stares out the window, brooding over the arrival of the Wilstons. This kinship training is a traditional system where the patriarch gathers relatives for education, but Henry knows the dark truth. It's a hostage system designed to keep branch families in line by holding their children at the main estate. Henry remembers the fear associated with this system from his own past. He realizes the Senate is behind this move. They are using Cattleya as a pawn to pressure the main house. Their goal is clear: have 𝐤𝐵𝒃 adopted into the main house to isolate 𝐤𝒂𝒃 and eventually push her out of the succession. Henry continues to feed 𝐤𝒂𝒃, his eyes hardening. He won't let his sister be sidelined by a political plan. He maintains a cold, calculated focus, his mind working 3 steps ahead. 𝐤𝒂𝒃, sensing the shift in the room, looks up at him with innocent confusion. Henry quickly masks his schemes with a gentle smile, telling her it's time for the banquet with the vassals. The trio enters the grand hall, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 flanked by her brothers, looking every bit the part of the family's future. But the trap is already set. 𝐤𝐵𝒃 is already seated at the table, waiting. The Duke makes his entrance, his presence commanding the entire room. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 watches him with wide, starstruck eyes, clearly intimidated by his power. He takes his place at the head of the table, and the dinner begins. As the adults discuss complex tax rates and regional policies, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 stays focused on what matters. The food. She happily digs into a piece of perfectly cooked beef, savoring every bite. 𝐤𝒂𝒃, however, is watching her like a hawk, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She reaches for a napkin with a practiced, elegant grace. In a move calculated to embarrass 𝐤𝒂𝒃, she leans over and wipes 𝐤𝒂𝒃's mouth, acting like a caring older sister. She puts on a performance of pure, angelic kindness for the gathered nobles. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 is left blinking in confusion, wondering what this girl is up to. The trap snaps shut. A nearby noble scoffs, mocking 𝐤𝒂𝒃's table manners and whispering that her commoner background from the orphanage is showing. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 continues her act, eating daintily and looking the picture of noble perfection. She radiates a false aura of innocence, making sure everyone sees her generosity toward the uncultured heir. The noble praises 𝐤𝒂𝒃 for her kindness, contrasting her behavior with 𝐤𝒂𝒃's messy appearance. The conversation turns to 𝐤𝒂𝒃's background, highlighting her training at the temple. Her father boasts loudly, claiming the temple practically begged her to stay because of her outstanding divine power. The Duke remains silent, watching as 𝐤𝒂𝒃 takes a piece of food and attempts to feed him directly. She flashes a dazzling, manipulative smile, telling the Duke how delicious the meal is. The surrounding nobles are enchanted, praising her personality, talent, and noble blood. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 glances sideways at 𝐤𝒂𝒃, her eyes gleaming with a hidden, triumphant smirk. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 realizes the game has officially begun. She's being systematically staged and outshined in her own home. The battle for the succession of the Dewbald house is reaching a boiling point. We flash back to the Wilston estate, where 𝐤𝒂𝒃's father is practically glowing with greed. He sees the kinship training not as a trial, but as the ultimate golden ticket for his daughter to seize the title of Lady of Dewbald. His wife is just as ruthless, reminding him that the elders and vassals are finally on their side. They are convinced that once the Duke sees 𝐤𝒂𝒃's grace, he'll realize she is the only true choice compared to the fake child of fate. The Wilstons aren't just relying on charm, they're banking on raw talent. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 possesses a level of divine power that's incredibly rare, even for the high-ranking nobility. At her young age, her abilities are already far beyond her peers, making her a formidable threat to 𝐤𝒂𝒃's position. They view 𝐤𝒂𝒃 as a powerless fraud who can't possibly compete with 𝐤𝒂𝒃's pedigree. With the main house's backing, they aren't just aiming for the Dewbald inheritance, they're looking at the seat of a cardinal. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 herself wears a mask of perfect innocence, confidently promising her mother that she will win over the Duke and the young masters without fail. On the surface, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 is the image of perfection, that loveliest child in Dewbald, with radiant blonde hair and eyes like a clear lake. She plays the part of the refined noble child so well that most adults can't help but be charmed by her act. But back at the banquet, the reality is much different. When the Duke offers 𝐤𝒂𝒃 a piece of meat, the little girl is caught off guard by the sudden gesture. Watching from the side, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 is absolutely fuming. The angelic girl is practically vibrating with rage as she watches the Duke's attention shift. The tension only grows as Henry joins in, his own protective and slightly jealous nature flaring up as he watches the interaction. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 is barely holding it together, her teeth gritted in a silent snarl as she realizes her perfect entrance isn't going as planned. Trying to keep the peace, 𝐤𝒂𝒃 offers a piece of meat back to the Duke, hoping to settle the atmosphere. The Duke's reaction is unexpected. He freezes, staring at the small morsel like it's a legendary artifact. Suddenly, he loses all composure, screaming for a taxidermist immediately. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 can only stare in pure confusion. The staff is equally bewildered, wondering why the most powerful man in the territory is treating a piece of dinner like a holy relic. To the Duke, this isn't just food, it's the first gift from his daughter, and he intends to preserve it forever. He guards the plate with a terrifying intensity, leaving the entire room in a stunned silence. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 is left in the shadows, seething because she gave him meat first, only to be completely ignored. By the time the meal ends, the staff are exhausted by the sheer chaos. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 feels like she's walked through a minefield, especially with 𝐤𝒂𝒃's murderous gaze burning into the back of her head. But the drama isn't over. Henry is also pouting, his eyes flashing with a cold intensity that tells 𝐤𝒂𝒃 he's feeling left out. Even though he tries to stay composed, his aura is practically boiling. 𝐤𝒂𝒃 realizes she has to balance the scales of favoritism before her brothers cause a scene. Desperate to find a gift for Henry, she scrambles to find anything she has on hand. She pulls out a few wilted daisies she had picked earlier in the garden. With a look of pure innocence, she offers the tattered flowers to him. The effect is instantaneous. Henry's cold aura vanishes, replaced by a blossoming glow of pure joy as he cradles the precious gift. But then he follows in his father's footsteps, frantically shouting for the taxidermist to be brought to the 5th tower to preserve the flowers immediately. The absurdity is cut short when a servant rushes in with an urgent message. Henry tries to brush him off, claiming they are busy with urgent matters. But the servant insists. The elders have submitted an official petition. They want 𝐤𝐬, the Lady of Wilston, to break the seal on the dormant mineral. 𝐤𝐵Lane's eyes go wide. She knows exactly what they're talking about. The dormant mineral is a legendary 𝐤𝐵Ld heirloom, said to contain a powerful water spirit. Henry is instantly on high alert. This isn't just a request. It's a calculated political strike. By asking 𝐤𝐬 to unseal the relic, the elders are publicly declaring that they don't recognize 𝐤𝐵Lane as the true heir. They are trying to force the Duke's hand to replace 𝐤𝐵Lane with 𝐤𝐬. Henry demands to know where the vassals are, his face darkening with fury. In the audience chamber, the elders are laying their trap. They argue that with a great drought approaching, they need the water spirit now more than ever. One of the lead conspirators smirks, claiming that since 𝐤𝐬 has such powerful divine power, she is the only one who can break the seal. Henry storms in with 𝐤𝐵Lane, warning them that allowing a branch family member to unseal a holy relic sets a dangerous precedent. The antagonist doesn't blink. He suggests a simple solution. The Duke should just adopt 𝐤𝐬 into the main house to avoid any legal issues. Henry sees right through the hidden agenda, his anger reaching a breaking point. The elder plays the victim, claiming he's only acting for the sake of the people suffering from the drought. He then turns his venom toward 𝐤𝐵Lane, openly mocking her in front of the court. He laughs, asking if the little lady even has a drop of divine power to begin with. His smug grin says it all. He thinks he has 𝐤𝐵Lane cornered. The Duke sits on his throne, silent and imposing, as the elders plead for him to look after the people. 𝐤𝐬 stands by, looking like a triumphant victor already. But then, a small voice cuts through the tension. 𝐤𝐵Lane steps forward, her arms raised high, and boldly announces, "Lebu wants to try." The room falls into a stunned silence. The elders and vassals can't believe what they're hearing. 𝐤𝐬's father is shocked, while 𝐤𝐬 herself looks on with a mixture of confusion and disdain. They think it's impossible for a fake like her to break a triple seal. But as 𝐤𝐵Lane looks at the mineral, her eyes sharpen. She might be playing the part of a clumsy child, but she has a secret plan that is about to flip the entire game on its head. The stakes couldn't be higher as the elders break into a cold sweat, terrified that 𝐤𝐵Lane might actually succeed. They desperately reassure themselves that she's nothing but a fake. After all, they've rigged the game. The only reason 𝐤𝐬 has a chance is that they secretly purchased a high-ranking priest's power to aid her. In their minds, this is the perfect trap. If 𝐤𝐵Lane fails to break the seal, she'll be humiliated and cast aside. Even worse, the magical backlash from such a failure would be devastating for a child. A wicked smirk spreads across an elder's face. Everything is going exactly as they planned. Henry, sensing the danger, begs 𝐤𝐵Lane to stop, offering to buy her any toy she wants just to keep her safe. 𝐤𝐵Lane puts on her best innocent child act, crying that she knows it's dangerous but has to try. Internally, she's laughing at the elders. They think they can use their numbers to pressure the Duke, but they've fundamentally misunderstood the man. 𝐤𝐵Lane remembers a dark future where these same elders pushed too far with a joint petition. In that timeline, the Duke didn't yield, he incinerated them where they stood. If that happens again, the temple will use the chaos as an excuse to seize 𝐤𝐵Lane, claiming the Duke is an unfit guardian. To prevent this, 𝐤𝐵Lane chooses a technical path, appraisal. While the observers doubt a child can handle such a delicate task, 𝐤𝐵Lane knows better. Appraisal doesn't require massive power, it requires surgical precision. As 𝐤𝐬 watches with a condescending sneer, 𝐤𝐵Lane focuses on the thread-like control she mastered through grueling practice in her past lives. She successfully bypasses the first and second seals, but then, the room erupts. A massive shockwave shatters the windows and sends the nobles reeling. The dormant mineral isn't just reacting, it's exploding with ancient energy. Henry and the Duke rush forward, but their own powers are strangely neutralized by the surge. Amidst the chaos, a haunting voice echoes through the hall, claiming it has finally found its child. Panic grips the manor as the very foundations shake. The knights realize the seal has been completely compromised and prepare for the worst. 𝐤𝐵Lane is stunned, wondering if she's accidentally caused a catastrophe. The mages are horrified to realize that the 4-year-old girl is the epicenter of this overwhelming divine power. 𝐤𝐬 can only watch in trembling denial, refusing to believe what she's seeing. As a knight tries to reach 𝐤𝐵Lane, a terrifying, dark aura manifests behind her. A massive, spectral figure towers over the room, warning everyone not to lay a hand on the child. The entity's power lashes out, throwing the mages back and leaving 𝐤𝐬 coughing up blood from the sheer pressure. The knights are paralyzed. The entire territory is now at risk of being leveled. 𝐤𝐵Lane is paralyzed with fear as the voice grows louder. But then, a familiar figure cuts through the storm. The Duke of 𝐤𝐵Ld walks calmly toward his daughter, ignoring the swirling magical vortex. He gently scoops her into his arms, silencing the chaos with a simple, "It's okay, 𝐤𝐵Lane." In the aftermath, the elders are left in shambles. The seal is gone, and the mages can no longer feel the mineral's restrictions. They realize their plan has backfired spectacularly. Instead of delegitimizing 𝐤𝐵Lane, they've proven she possesses power far beyond any high priest. Arguments break out among the vassals. Some now believe she is the key to 𝐤𝐵Ld's future, while others still fear she's a temple spy. Later that night, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 rests, the doctor finding nothing physically wrong with her. As soon as she's alone, she sits up, her eyes glowing with intensity. She knows the entity is still there. Demanding answers, she asks the voice who it is. From the moonlight emerges a majestic, horned spirit, finally revealing its true form. The mysterious spirit towers over 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, its voice echoing with a weight that transcends time. It speaks of a qualification she must earn, but as spectral chains tighten around its form, it's clear a powerful force is sealing its lips, preventing the truth from being revealed. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes she's been given a cryptic hint, a breadcrumb trail leading to her next objective. In a flash of insight, she remembers the legendary item, the second 𝐸𝐸𝐸. If anything can grant her the standing she needs, it's that relic. To make her move, she needs to escape the watchful eyes around her. She leans into her role as a harmless child, blurting out that she needs a bathroom break in the most toddler way possible. She sits there, maintaining a perfectly blank, innocent expression to sell the act. But internally, she's absolutely mortified. The fact that she actually used such baby talk makes her soul want to leave her body. Regret aside, she doesn't have a second to waste. She has to find the 𝐸𝐸𝐸, and she has to do it now. Creeping through the estate, she peeks through a doorway, only to find a storm brewing. The Baroness is mid-meltdown, clutching her daughter Cat and accusing 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 of a vicious attack. She demands the Duke hold the little lady accountable for the chaos. The Baron joins in, shouting at the top of his lungs, completely oblivious to the thin ice he's standing on. The tension in the room is suffocating. The Duke's sons are clearly reaching their limit with these accusations. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 watches from the shadows, seriously considering turning back before she gets caught in the crossfire. But then, Isaac's eyes glow with a predatory light. He flatly tells the Baron that he's being too noisy and that it makes him want to kill him. He realizes a second too late that he said the quiet part out loud, but the damage is done. The Baron freezes in terror. Desperate, the Baroness tries to play the blood relative card, claiming 𝐾atleya's lineage should protect them from such threats. A teacup clinks against its saucer with lethal precision. Henry offers a chilling smile, noting that he's only tolerating the Baron for the moment. The sheer killing intent radiating from the young masters leaves the Baron and Baroness trembling, realizing they've picked a fight with the wrong family. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 decides it's time to exit stage left before things get even bloodier. Too late. Isaac spots her immediately, demanding to know why she's out of bed instead of resting. Panicking, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 doubles down on the cute child routine, hoping her innocent face will distract them from the fact she was eavesdropping. Inside, she's screaming. Her baby talk is getting worse the more she panics, and it's starting to hurt her pride. She refocuses. The Duke is sitting at his desk, his gaze sharp and calculating. He looks at her not just as a daughter, but as a puzzle to be solved. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, having lived 4 lives, knows exactly how to handle a gaze like that. She activates her ultimate weapon, the tearful child act. It works instantly. The Duke's cold demeanor vanishes as he scoops her up, his voice softening with genuine concern as he asks if she's still in pain. Seizing the opportunity, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 points a trembling finger at the Baron, claiming he's the one who scared her. The reaction is nuclear. Isaac drops all pretenses of civility, declaring he'll kill the man on the spot. Henry, ever the refined one, calmly suggests he should extract the man's eyeballs instead. The Baron breaks out into a cold sweat, realizing he's one wrong move away from a very messy end. The Duke and his sons loom over him like vengeful gods, their combined auras practically crushing the man where he stands. The Baron and his family scramble out of the room in a state of pure panic. 𝐾atleya glares back, humiliated and seething with rage. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 watches them go, safely tucked in the Duke's arms. As 𝐾atleya vows internal vengeance, the Duke turns his full attention back to 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚. The sunset casts a warm glow over them as he asks if she's finally feeling better. He looks at her with a rare, genuine softness. He even offers a small, supportive smile. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 knows this is her window. She puts on her best, Puss in Boots, face and asks for the 𝐸𝒸𝒸𝐸. The Duke's expression goes dead serious for a heartbeat. Then, without a word, he smashes open a reinforced golden treasure box with his bare hands. Inside, resting on a plush red cushion, is the second 𝐸𝒸𝒸𝐸. He hands it over as if it's a common toy, even offering to go raid the temple if she wants another one. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is stunned. She expected a struggle, but the Duke just handed over a world-class relic like it was a piece of candy. Later, alone in the garden, she clutches the relic. She wonders if she needs to channel her divine power to wake it. She closes her eyes, focusing every ounce of her will into the item. Her eyes snap open, glowing with an intense, celestial blue. A massive vortex of wind and light erupts around her, petals swirling in a violent dance. As the storm settles, the spirit finally manifests in its true, majestic form, ready to greet its master. The night garden glows with an eerie luminescence. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 isn't mesmerized, she's panicked. Terrified that the blazing light will draw unwanted eyes to her secret ritual, she frantically demands the spirit shut it down. The entity, known as 𝒂𝒂𝒃𝒚, the 22nd pillar, remains calm. He reassures her that as his summoner, she is the only one who can perceive his presence. He leans in, confirming that his manifestation is for her eyes only. Curiosity piqued, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 asks if others could summon him too. 𝒂𝒂𝒃's expression turns sharp. He explains that while possible, others require a cocktail of dark ingredients, a powerful obsession, a rare treasure, and a massive stroke of luck. But most importantly, there is always a steep price to be paid. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 gulps. the weight of the moment sinking in. A price? Bune drops the bombshell with a chilling smile. The cost is a human soul. The realization hits 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 like a physical blow. She's heard of the name Bune before in her past lives. Pointing a trembling finger, she finally connects the dots. She asks the question she's dreading. Are you a demon? Bune doesn't even try to hide it, cheerily confirming his identity with a bright smile. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's mind reels as she assesses her new family situation. Her father is a mastermind, her brothers are a warmonger and a viper, and her maids are a collection of swindlers and serial killers. And now, she's gone and added a demon to the roster. If the temple ever finds she's consorting with a pillar of hell, she's finished. But Bune isn't interested in her existential crisis. He scoops the tiny girl up, marveling at how much cuter she is than he expected. He begins squishing her cheeks like they're made of dough. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 struggles in his grip, shouting for him to let go. But the demon simply laughs, claiming he just likes her too much. Bune's tone shifts to something more profound. He explains that while demons have always granted the wishes of others, no one has ever been able to grant a wish for a demon except for her. He offers her a deal. She can ask anything of him. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's eyes sparkle with newfound determination. If only she can hold this power. And if she doesn't have to pay the soul price others do, she can truly change her fate. She asks if she can really use a demon's power to fulfill her desires. Bune's smile widens. His yes is all she needs to hear. She clenches her fist, exhilarated by the sheer potential of having a demon in her pocket. But a contract goes both ways. She asks what Bune wants in return. Bune looks her in the eye, ready to state his demand. He asks for a gemstone. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is baffled. A demon wanting a simple rock. She asks if he can't just manifest them himself. Bune bluntly admits he can't. He explains that even demons have specialized powers, and gem making isn't in his resume. The next morning, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is back to her innocent child routine in the garden, but the toll of the summon is clear. She stares miserably at a plate of vegetables. Bune, invisible to the maids, hovers over her like a nagging parent, telling her to eat a balanced diet to grow healthy. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 shoots him a look of pure annoyance, thinking he's way too noisy. The demon's heart breaks at the rejection, but 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is focused on the logistics. Maintaining a demon requires a massive amount of divine power, making it hard to keep her adult mindset sharp. She's forced to eat 3 times as much and sleep constantly just to stay functional. Worse, Bune's specific power is summoning the souls of the dead, not exactly a get-rich-quick ability. And the gem he wants isn't just any rock. He wants the goddess's tears. It's a one-of-a-kind sapphire currently locked away in the most secure place possible, the temple. As she ponders how to pull off a holy heist, a shadow falls over her. It's 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, wearing a deceptively sweet smile. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 claims she collapsed while leaving the castle and stopped by to say goodbye after receiving treatment. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 doesn't buy the act for a second, continuing to focus on her snack. But 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 isn't here for a friendly chat. She leans in, dropping a bombshell. The temple is overjoyed to hear about 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's incredible power. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 freezes. This wasn't part of the plan. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 sneers, her true colors leaking out. She tells 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 that the temple is coming to take her back to verify her power. She mocks her, claiming she'll be the one to serve the Duke, while 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is locked away. She calls 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 a moron, reveling in her supposed victory. Suddenly, the guards nearby hear a commotion. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's smug expression vanishes, replaced by utter confusion. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 has thrown herself onto the ground, clutching her leg and crying out in pain. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 realizes too late that she's been baited. As the guards rush over, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's inner monologue reveals her secret weapon. In this district, she is the undisputed king of exaggerating pain to frame her enemies. The room erupts into chaos as the staff bursts through the doors, eyes wide with panic as they cry out for the young lady. Isaac and Johan charge in a heartbeat later, their faces twisted in concern as Isaac demands to know what on earth happened. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚, looking small and defenseless, points a finger and delivers the killing blow. She hit me. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 can only stammer in terror as the Duke's voice thunders through the room, calling her name in a tone that promises retribution. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's father is stunned, his mouth hanging open as the weight of the accusation hits him. Desperate, 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 turns on the waterworks, sobbing for her mother in a pathetic attempt to play the victim. Her parents quickly pull her close, trying to demand an explanation, but Isaac cuts through the noise with cold, hard facts. She hit 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 tries to spin a lie, claiming she was just brushing something off the young lady's face, while her father arrogantly tells 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 that enough is enough. He dares to ask what grudge 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 could possibly have against his daughter to frame her like this. Suddenly, the man is sent reeling back, gasping in shock as Isaac towers over him. Isaac points to his own face, his gaze icy. "This is from hitting me," he declares, preparing to expose the lie. He grabs the man, cornering him with terrifying logic. Isaac's eyes glow with a predatory light. If 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 was just brushing off crumbs, then her hand shouldn't be covered in oil. He seizes 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚's hand, revealing the damning evidence. "Then where on your daughter's hand did the oil get smeared?" Behind the scenes, Chibi 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 smirks. She used her own oil to fake the mark, and 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 walked right into the trap. Her parents are paralyzed with shame, realizing their daughter's guilt is plain for all to see. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 finally snaps under the pressure, admitting she only tapped her cheek lightly, effectively confessing to the assault. She loses all composure, screaming that 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 is just a commoner orphan who is beneath her. Her father can only stare in horror as his daughter's true, ugly nature is laid bare. 𝐤𝒂𝒃𝒚 collapses into a wailing mess on the floor, revealing that her father and the Viscount had promised her she would be the one the Duke accepted. Isaac and Jahan look down at the pathetic display with nothing but pure, unadulterated disdain. The family is left in the dust, their reputation shattered as the Duke's carriage prepares to depart. Soon Leblanc is traveling through a serene, flower-lined path, but the mood inside the carriage is far from peaceful. Yoon, the demon, senses her irritation. Leblanc admits she's upset because 𝐤𝐴TLEA's meddling has forced this trip to the temple. Because 𝐤𝐴TLEA reported her powers, Leblanc is being sent for a mandatory verification. She worries that if they realize her holy power has grown this strong, they'll drag her away to the central temple forever. Yoon offers a characteristically dark solution. "Shall I destroy the temple for you?" Leblanc is momentarily stunned by the offer, but the demon's smile is wicked as he adds the fine print. He can do it, but only if he draws out all her power, which would kill her. Leblanc's annoyed chibe face says it all. That's not exactly a helpful suggestion. Still, she tries to think positively. This temple holds the goddess's tears, a legendary sapphire. Deep within the temple walls, priests pray over the glowing gem, unaware that Leblanc is already planning to steal it for Boone. Suddenly, a loud crack echoes through the air as the carriage wheel snaps. Leblanc is tossed around like a doll, while Boone casually asks if she's all right. The driver is frantic, apologizing profusely for the mechanical failure. The knight, Nas, is livid, berating the driver for failing to inspect the carriage before such an important trip. The poor driver can only blame the muddy roads from the previous night's rain. Seeing an opportunity, Leblanc hops out of the carriage, telling them it's okay. She tells the guards to rest while she explores. Secretly, she's scouting the area to find an escape route for her future heist. Nas insists she can't go alone, but Leblanc has a plan. She points to a quiet maid and asks for Nia to be her escort. Nos smirks, doubting a simple maid can provide any real protection. The maid turns to him with a sweet, terrifying smile and asks what class he's from. The knight is caught off guard, completely confused. When he mentions his class, the maid casually reveals she is from the 317 class. Her aura shifts instantly into something monstrous and overwhelming. She reveals that the current vice captain used to be her errand boy. The knights turn pale, realizing they are in the presence of a legendary veteran. They can only watch in fear as the maid politely escorts Leblanc into the woods, knowing Nas is as good as dead for disrespecting her. Deep in the forest, Leblanc's eyes sparkle as she finds an 𝐤𝐳𝐷 tree. She's already calculating the profit 50 francs per gram, but her celebration is cut short. She stops dead in her tracks, discovering a mysterious blonde boy lying unconscious among the flowers.